diplomatic race. It says Ramaphosa made an important statement at the time of global tension over the validity of diversity, equity and inclusion and the global commitment to the rule of law. The group further says the South African leader represented not only South Africa but the entire continent and painted a picture of a vibrant continent rooted in the rule of law and working for economic growth and social well-being. They stressed that Africa should continue with AGOA, with the U.S. as a strong trading partner.
Justice Modibo Saka of Mali has been elected president of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. He takes over from Justice Imani Aboud, whose term as president has come to an end after 4 years at the helm. Justice Saka served as the vice president during the final 2 years of Justice Aboud's presidency. Justice Bensuala Chafika of Algeria has been elected as the new vice president. They were elected at the court's 77th ordinary session held in Arusha, Tanzania. The new bureau will serve 2-year term from 2025 to 2027 in accordance with Article 21 of the Protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the establishment of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. South Africa's Umkhonto we Sizwe party leadership has redeployed its Secretary General Flo Chivambu to Parliament. The party made the announcement at its media briefing in Durban in the KwaZulu-Natal province yesterday afternoon. Last week, Colin Makubele succeeded Mzwane Lemanyi, who was removed as chief whip of the MK party in Parliament. Chivambu says he has welcomed the redeployment.
I want to confirm that the national officials have taken a decision which I fully accept as a disciplined member of Umkhonto we Sizwe. We've been redeployed to the National Assembly and will continue to play the role of advancing the agenda and program of Umkhonto we Sizwe. It has been an invaluable role that we have played and a humbling experience that we have been assigned by the President. I want to thank him for leading the program of unification of all the progressive forces in South Africa. That is the agenda that we're going to continue to pursue.
Lastly, the UN Security Council could vote as early as today on a new draft resolution demanding an immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, respected by all the parties. The initiative of the elected 10 members of the council seeks a vote by the 15-member council, where a US veto is likely to again loom large. Even if the text is adopted, enforcing implementation will be a high bar to achieve, given the parties to date and Israel's insistence that Hamas be completely defeated before ending the war. Showan Rice Peace elaborates.
The latest effort in the Council comes amid a catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza and what the UN Secretary-General earlier described as the unthinkable loss of life in the enclave. The draft text up for a vote would also demand the release of all the hostages held by Hamas and other groups, and the immediate lifting of all restrictions on the entry of humanitarian aid in Gaza and its distribution at scale, including through United Nations mechanisms that have been hampered by stringent Israeli restrictions. Security Council resolutions are legally binding on all member states and must receive at least 9 votes in favour and no vetoes from permanent members to pass.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news, the Sawa Banyana beat Zambia by 2-0 to win the Tri-Nation Series as they continue their preparations for their WAFCON title defense, while Lorenzo Musetti moves into the semi-finals of the Roland Garros tournament, will face off with the defending champions Carlos Alcaraz in the semi-finals of Roland Garros. Details of these and other stories coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Time of the day after the 6 o'clock news that we bring you a daily roundup of the top stories and events that took place across the continent in the past 24 hours. And we give this to you in a concise manner so that you can get quickly up to speed with the news that's played out. And we use our journalists, a team of experts and analysts to put all of that news into context for you. And we start today's roundup with this story. An explosion has killed 2 suspected rebels, including a female suicide bomber near a Roman Catholic shrine in Uganda's capital Kampala on Tuesday, but no other people have been reported hurt.
The blast happened near a Roman Catholic shrine in the south of Kampala, and authorities say no other people were hurt. According to local media, it took place as people were gathering for Martyrs' Day celebrations. The day commemorates Christians who were killed for their faith in the 19th century. Ugandan Police Commissioner Anatoli Mulatawa said heightened intelligence and surveillance had prevented the attack.
Our deployment was too high, the surveillance was too high. They thought they were going to get any advantage of fulfilling their mission, only to be put out of action by our security.
He added that teams were now working to determine the type of explosives used and possible motives. Ugandan Army spokesperson Chris Mugezi told Reuters that the attackers were thought to be linked to the Allied Democratic Forces, a Congo-based rebel group affiliated with Islamic State. There has been no immediate claim of responsibility.
The number of people who have fled Sudan since the beginning of its civil war in 2023 has surpassed 4 million. UN refugee agency officials said on Tuesday, adding that many survivors faced inadequate shelter due to funding shortages.
Here's agency spokesperson Eugene Byun.
A devastating milestone in what is the world's most damaging displacement crisis at the moment.
Byun said if the conflict continues, the agency expects thousands more to flee, putting regional and global stability at stake. UNHCR's Dessous Patrice Ahunsu said shelter conditions are dire in Chad due to funding shortages, with only 14% of funding appeals met.
More than 800,000 refugees more has crossed into Chad, bringing the total of Sudanese refugees in Chad to 1.2 million. So the number of Sudanese refugees has tripled without a significant increase in funding. Life-saving assistance cannot be delivered at the scale and at the speed that is required.
Germany has acted unlawfully by turning away asylum seekers at the border. That's a ruling from a Berlin court, citing a case in which border police expelled 3 Somalis who'd tried to enter the country from Poland. Nima Pratten has more.
The ruling challenges the tougher migration stance by Chancellor Friedrich Merz's Conservative-led coalition. He was elected in February, promising a migration crackdown that has caused concern in neighbouring countries. Germany's Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt defended the expulsions.
In this decision, the court stated that the justification for our measures should have been more specific. This means we will be complying with this request and providing more detailed reasons. We are sticking to the rejections because we recognize that the legal basis is clear.
Dobrindt reiterated that the number of asylum seekers is, quote, still too high.
The aim is to send a clear signal that we will continue to maintain that Germany cannot cope with this high number of new arrivals, asylum seekers, and refugees, and that these rejections will therefore continue to take place.
Global economic growth is slowing more than expected only a few months ago as the fallout from the Trump administration's trade war takes a bigger toll on the U.S. economy, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development said on Tuesday, revising down its outlook. Sierra Lee reports.
It said global economic growth is on course to slow from 3.3% last year to 2.9% this year. But the OECD warned the growth outlook would likely be even weaker if protectionism increases and could further fuel inflation and disrupt supply chains. Donald Trump's tariff announcements since he took office in January have already hit financial markets, forcing him to walk back some of his initial stances. The OECD warned that while new tariffs may create incentives to manufacture in the US, higher import prices would squeeze consumers and economic policy uncertainty could hold back corporate investment.
And that's how we come to the end of today's Africa Roundup. We'll have more for you tomorrow after the 6 o'clock news. Right now, though, we're going to take a pause for a moment, because coming up, we're going to go into what's been happening in West Africa. And Asanda Beda will be talking to our resident analyst there.
Isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
So after our roundup, that's general information, we zoom into a section on our continent, and today we're looking at West Africa, taking a look at some stories making headlines there, and of course getting more in-depth in terms of those chats with an analyst to get into these stories. So today we speak to political scientist and conflict resolution expert, Dr. David Matsanga. Dr. David, how are you on this Wednesday, Dr. Matsanga?
Good morning, Africa. Good morning, all of you in the studio. Good morning, Peter, and the rest of Africa. I am happy, and I'm happy to God that He has kept me alive to be here in your studio.
Thank you so much, and we're blessed to always catch up with these chats on West Africa. Let's start with Nigeria today. The Nigerian flood that has killed 200 people now. Yesterday we spoke to our correspondent there. The figures were still at 151, but we knew that the search was continuing for those who were missing. The town of Mokwa was hit with the worst flash flood from overnight rains. We learned also from yesterday's conversation that this is a common occurrence in Nigeria around this time of year.
It has been a common occurrence across Nigeria. As you know very well that there is no care for climate restoration of ecosystems in Nigeria. But what puzzles me and what will puzzle any African is a huge country with huge resources, 250 million people. They don't have a prepared disaster preparedness. There is no program, no coordination whatsoever that was actually put that we have in Nigeria. You have seen everybody is doing something which is different from the other. There is no coordination to rescue people, to know how many villages, where the villages were. The river, the floods have swept almost everything. People, you even see government officials confused. So this comes back to, is Africa ever ready for anything? Have we ever been proactive? Or we are reactive? Africa seems to be reactive to everything. Nigeria knows that every year, this month, between now and a certain month of October, this same place has the same problems. The rain, because of the destruction of the eco-green, the trees, cutting down the trees for charcoal, exporting this charcoal to Saudi Arabia and other areas, they have destroyed the environment. And therefore the rain will come and the rivers will be over flooded. But Nigeria, as you know, is always seeking everything, seeking pollution, seeking floods, seeking corruption, seeking administration, collapse of governance.
So on that point, Dr. Matsanga, of being more proactive than reactive, how should the federal government respond? Should they have questions of, but why were you not respondent when the meteorological agencies gave you warnings? Because those were issued a few days before these floods, but still no contingency plans were in place. As you say, poor infrastructure issues were not addressed.
That is what I see. I say proactive, a government being proactive. The federal government was warned The meteorological department knows it is not 1 year. It is not today, yesterday. Every year these rains come and so many people die. In fact, you are putting a number to a very small number. Over 700 people are missing. We don't know where they are. It is coming to 1,000 people. This is a calamity that should not have happened. They should have warned these people to leave this area much earlier. But the government in Abuja is concentrated on only making money out of oil. They don't care about the people. They care about money. No institutions are available for anyone to know when the rain will be bad, when the floods will come. It is a terrible state in Nigeria.
And it is a terrible state. And unfortunately, because so many are missing, we can expect those fatality numbers to go up. Whether we want to admit that or not. But the homes that are in Mokwa as well are built in places that are not conducive for dealing with bad weather conditions, especially flash floods. What does this speak to in terms of a housing problem that there could be in Nigeria that hasn't been addressed yet?
Across Africa, the housing problem is the same everywhere. The housing problem, especially in Nigeria, everybody builds the way he wants. There are no regulations in Africa anyway. You cannot even regulate if you come to take people. Also, there is a problem of mindset, which we should actually try to educate our people. Even if you tell the people that there will be an earthquake here coming, the man will put his good house there where the earthquake will be passing, or where the split between one party to other will be. And then he says, the government has left me in trouble. When you knew that this is a mudslide area, when you knew that this place can create anything, floods will come. People were building in these areas. These floods are not the floods of today. These floods have been there for millions and millions of years. Before the creation, the rivers always come in that particular month. So also, our people, the citizens, must also agree that the government cannot help us at any time only. The government helps you all the time, but you must help yourself more than the government does to you.
And the Nigerian people who are affected by the floods are seeking government aid in terms of dealing with the after effects. Government had said that they had distributed aid, but this was met with criticism from the people on the ground. Most families saying they have not received anything.
Corruption. Aid is again being sold to the same people who have no money to buy. Aid is stolen. Aid is taken. You remember these are areas where the rule of law has collapsed. You know, part of Nigeria, you see Nigeria on the map. My sister, if you ever travel to Nigeria, you have to be careful. In some areas, you are told not to step. So even this cell, the rule of law completely has collapsed. The confidence in government institutions has collapsed. People do the things like we are in the worldwide east, west of America, where anybody, you have a gun, you have the will. That is what it is in Nigeria at the moment. People kill each other. Herdsmen come and take others. Human rights abuses are not worth. So who can sell you the food? Who can give you even the food that you want? It is chaotic. It is similar to what is in Gaza today.
Does the government of Nigeria have these funds readily available for these floods and relief from the floods? We just not so far ago, we're speaking about a teachers' hike and a pay hike strike rather, and they're still making payouts in terms of that and balancing the teachers' pay hike strike. Are there funds available? And if there aren't, where can Nigeria look to secure these relief funds?
Nigeria is like any other country. It has a lot of money, but corrupt money, values. Corruption has killed Nigeria. It has money. Money is available to pay these teachers. But every step you move in Nigeria, you must pay in order to move. Even when you want to move a container from the port, which is your car, you have to pay. The customs says this is 2 million. but I want 2.5 million. 500 is mine before you take your car. Even when you're in the right, corruption has killed that several states in Africa, but worse in Nigeria. So this money is available, but the government misuses it on other things. There are too many protocols, too many bureaucracies in Nigeria that for an ordinary man to receive a service, it is like going through hell, then come back to us and say, I suffered. So these priorities in Nigeria are upside down. To be very honest, it's a state in Africa that needs help. It is a state in Africa that needs, we talk about it, because it is one of the biggest states with a big population, but they have not led us properly. That's why most of Africa has fallen out, because we see Nigeria falling. Everywhere you go, Nigeria starts to be smelling. It smells in terms of manners, in behavior, corruption, fraud, did so many things.
Let's move to one of your favorite countries, Dr. Masanga, Burkina Faso. They have awarded a mining company, Perenti, a huge gold mine contract there. Perenti being a subsidiary of African UMS, or Underground Mining Services, which has been providing mining services in Burkina Faso since 2018. But what else do we know about Perenti?
After very serious vetting, they have finally come to say, you have to do it on our terms. The gold mining now in Burkina Faso, this gentleman, Ibrahim, he has built one of the biggest gold smelters in Africa, bigger than that one of yours in Johannesburg. And everybody, I think everybody in Africa will start taking their gold, that place for packaging and smelting and whatever it is. So they have been vetted properly. And they have now come into partner up with the local citizens, the locals of Burkina Faso, not these companies from outside coming to give you dictated terms. No, I was there and I saw when this company was bargaining and saying, please allow us to partner with you. You can take the biggest percentage. We shall take some. That is one of the problems that is killing the Americans and the French, because they are not going to pick this money anymore. They are not going to be monopoly. There's no monopoly of the foreign powers coming to say, in my own country, Burkina Faso, you are the owner of a mine and you are even telling me how to work.
So this contract with Perenti is valued at over $707 million US. How long is the contract, and what will form part of the duties of Perenti in Burkina Faso?
It is to facilitate the sale of the gold. One, to facilitate the bringing of equipment. Two, to make sure that the reserves are brought back to build roads. I looked at the contract briefly and I saw the terms are very good, to give to the neighboring places, to the places where the gold mines are, infrastructure, schools, medical facilities, roads, even up to the airports. There is quite a lot that this younger man of mine, a friend of mine, is doing. They have not constructed like those days where gold miners come and take your things in South Africa. They take the gold, but they don't care about the workers.
And how long is the contract, Dr. Masanga?
The contract looks like, I did not look at the clause, but I think they gave them 10 years.
All right.
10 years renewable. I did not look at it, that clause, yes.
Let's move to Guinea now. There have been calls have been mounting from media, especially journalists, about a missing journalist, Habib Morane Kamara, and the media has been putting pressure now on the government of Guinea to find answers in terms of where this missing journalist is. Kamara was arrested in early December by uniformed men, it's reported. Has it been confirmed if these uniformed men were law enforcement officers or not?
Of course, uniformed in Guinea is a military. Every uniformed man is a military. So there is no way of saying you need confirmation. he was picked by the military. But let me go back to the habit of picking journalists, which is taking place across Africa, which we must condemn. Most of the journalists are here to spread the message. Some of us are investigative journalists of long standing, credentials. We have been investigating serious cases. We have not been abducted. We have not been beaten up. We have not been done sad. Luckily enough, I and Ndoro, your friend there, we have been harassed a bit. But there's a trend coming out in West Africa and in Africa in general, where people are killing journalists, abducting journalists. It's not very good at all. And this in West Africa, this regime of Guinea is the worst regime that it doesn't know where it belongs to. This guy took over Conde, but he became a French puppet, where he's not even rhyming with his own brothers of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. He has not shown the true colors. The two regimes of military that I see that were favored by the French, whom we don't talk much about, is that one and Gabon. This one is now showing the true colors of what a military situation is. They don't want criticism. The journalist was simply reporting stories that the military is doing the same things that Conde was doing. So if you become critical in a place like that, as a journalist, we must also warn the young journalists.
We're running out of time completely, Dr. Matsanga. And just lastly, and very briefly, we've got about 40 seconds on this one, but I want to know your views on Microsoft founder Bill Gates saying that he'll be spending most of his fortune to Africa, improving health and education in the coming 20 years.
We must first of all structure these agreements. We must be careful. We are coming in with commercial merchants, conflict merchants like Bill Gates, bringing us things that we don't know. And you say you are spending $200 billion on Africans. What is inside this $200 billion? We don't want to wake up tomorrow. These are the same men who told us that we shall die in millions. And today they are coming up. This same man wanted to buy
even
World
with U.S. Donald Trump's cuts of aid into the continent, you don't think this would form any relief? We need to be careful and not really go for it.
We can't come from a frying pan to fire. We must stay in the middle. What is he coming with strings attached? If Trump has withdrawn, it's 4 years. Why can't we wait? Why are we rushing for his money? His money is also attached to, you remember he wanted to buy World Health Organization. A man who wants to buy World Health Organization, he's coming to buy our African Union. And African presidents are watching, are clapping hands, are sharing platform. It is not very good at all. No, we must have a structured, well-ordained program before this money is accepted in Africa. Please.
Well, let's leave it there, Dr. Matsanga. I wanted to hear your views on that one before we let you go. But thank you so much again for joining us on this Wednesday. Have a great day.
I am really against Bill Gates, and I don't care a damn whatever he is. I am against him. I'm against his money. He's like a George Soros funding regime change in Africa. I am not.
We leave it there then with Dr.
all.
David Matsanga, who is a political scientist and conflict resolution expert, giving us an overview of an analysis in terms of headlines that have been taking place in the West African region of our continent. 6:31 Central African time it is. Let's say good morning to Onele Nzinzi with our news headlines.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Nigeria's Defense Chief of Staff, General Christopher Musa, has called for the country's borders with its 4 neighbors to be completely fenced in order to curb the entrance of armed groups amid escalating insecurity. Former Democratic Republic of Congo President Joseph Kabila met with women and youth associations to discuss efforts to restore peace across the country. During the meeting, Kabila expressed his commitment to re-establishing stability for the Congolese people and bringing in an end to the ongoing conflict. And the UN Security Council could vote as early as today on a new draft resolution demanding an immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, respected by all the parties. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
And it's time to take a first look at what's been happening in the world of sport. And at the desk this morning, we say good morning to you, Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Very good morning from the sports desk. We'll start here. So Banyana wrapped up their Three Nations Challenge series in style on Tuesday afternoon. This after defeating Zambia by 2-0 at the Lucas Masterpieces Maribe Stadium in South Africa's capital city, Pretoria, in a tightly contested and often physical clash between the two regional neighbours. Now, after a goalless first half, the South African senior women's national team stepped up the intensity in the second half, with Bongeka Gamede breaking the deadlock in the 74th minute with a stunning free kick, her first goal for coach Desiree Ellis' side. Now, the momentum stayed with Banyana and Jermaine Sepo-Sinwe doubled the lead in the 82nd minute to secure the win and the tournament title. Reflecting on the team's performance, Dr. Ellis commended her players for sticking to the game plan while also highlighting areas the team still needs to improve on as they prepare for the upcoming Women's Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Morocco in July. So Zambia, who came into the fixture after a 1-1 draw with Botswana that took place over the weekend, posed a tough test for Banyana throughout the game. The head coach Nora Haptul also admitting that her side struggled to convert key moments into goals. Now, with 2 wins from the 2 games in the series, including a 3-2 victory over Botswana, Banyana will now shift their focus to the WAFCON 2025, carrying with them, of course, the momentum as well as the valuable experience. On to tennis news now. Defending champion Carlos Alcaraz produced a dominant display to beat Tommy Paul of the USA and reach the semi-finals at Roland Garros for a 3rd straight year. The second seed needed only 53 minutes to establish a 2-set lead, losing only 1 game in the process. American Paul offered plenty of resistance during a more competitive 3rd set, but Alcaraz broke again for a 5-4 lead and quickly wrapped it up 6-love, 6-1 and 6-4. The Spaniard will now face 23-year-old Lorenzo Musetti for a place in Sunday's final. The Italian 8th seed defeated Francis Taifo of the USA 6-2, 4-6, 7-5 and 6-2 earlier on Tuesday and is into a Grand Slam semi-final for a second time in his career, having of course reached the Wimbledon last 4 back in 2024. Taifo, the first American to feature in the French Open quarterfinal for 22 years, fought back to take the second set after Musetti dominated the opener, but the 15th seed fell away after losing a grilling 3rd set and could not keep up with Musetti's graceful but punishing style of play in that 4th set. Meanwhile, the world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka will face 3-time defending champion Iga Swiatek in a blockbuster French Open semi-final between the 2 title contenders. Sabalenka edged a tight quarterfinal against China's Olympic champion Zhang Wen 7-6 and 6-3 on a blustery court Philippe Chatrier on Tuesday. Now, Poland's Swiatek then came through 6-1, 7-5 against Elena Svitolina to set up a fascinating last 4 encounter. Belarusian Sabalenka replaced 5th seed Swiatek as the world number 1 in October of last year. The pair have met 12 times, with Swiatek leading head-to-head 8-4, but they have not met at a major since the 2022 US Open semi-finals. Swiatek has won 4 of the past 5 Roland Garros titles, while Sabalenka is bidding for her first ever title in Paris. For all that Swiatek has dominated the French Open in recent years, Sabalenka is the player to beat this time around. She has won 3 titles this year, including 1 on the Madrid clay, and also reached the 2 other finals, as well as also strengthening her grip on the top rankings on the women's WTA tour. Back home now, the eThekwini municipality in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province says preparations for the 98th Comrades Marathon are in full swing. The biggest sporting event on the South African calendar is scheduled for the 8th of June, this coming Sunday, by the way. This year is also a down run from Pietermaritzburg to Durban. The city's Gugu Selilana says they have activated a comprehensive operational plan to ensure a spotless and welcoming environment for the ultramarathon.
The plan is part of a broader city beautification and readiness program coordinated across multiple departments to ensure that Durban is on top form for the runners. CSW will be cleaning the entire eThekwini boundary from Cato Ridge to the Moisma Beda Stadium's People's Park, ensuring that all waste is collected and the route remains litter-free after the race. In addition, waste receptacles will be strategically placed along the route to encourage responsible disposal from the spectators.
And finally, the 2025 Wonder Diamond League continues to take shape as the world's biggest track, as well as field stars, plot their route to the series final in Zurich on the 27th to the 28th of August. So with the World Athletics Championships in Tokyo looming at the end of the outdoor season, the top level clashes in the Diamond League will be crucial for many athletes to get a medal winning a shape. The Diamond League has always been a place for emerging stars to make their breakthrough on the global stage. This year will be no different, with several of the top sports' most exciting talents already confirmed for the Diamond League appearance in 2025. Well, that's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Tulisile Buddha, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Tulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Tune in and turn up the volume. This is Channel Africa.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of business now as we say good morning for the first time on this Wednesday to Chandugo Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning and thank you, Asanda. Mali has suspended artisanal gold mining activities during the June to September rainy season to protect workers from landslides. A spokesperson for the ministry says that meteorological services have forecast heavy rains from the 15th of June to the 30th of September. In March, the government suspended the granting of new artisanal mining permits to foreigners after a couple of accidents left dozens dead. Artisanal mining is a common activity across much of West Africa and has increased in recent years due to growing demand for the precious metal and rising prices. The South African Department of Minerals and Petroleum Resources, DMPR, has decreased fuel prices following the dismissal of the Economic Freedom Fighters' fuel levy increase court challenge. The party argued in the Western Cape High Court that the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, took an incorrect approach in his decision to propose an increase in the general fuel levy. Godongwana announced the increase when he tabled the third revised budget in Parliament last month. The department's director for fuel pricing, Robert Make, says the changes which came into effect at midnight were influenced by several factors.
Both grades of petrol 93 and 95 octane will decrease by 5 cents a litre. Diesel will decrease by 36.9 cents a litre. Illuminating paraffin at retail level will decrease by 75 cents a litre, and LP gas will decrease by 89 cents per kilogram. The reason for these fuel price changes are as follows. The first one is the lower oil prices and stronger rand against the dollar during the period under review.
An economist at Standard Bank, Elna Mulman, has noted that while economic growth in South Africa outperformed the bank's stagnant projections, it remains too low. Data released by Statistics South Africa show that the economy grew marginally by 0.1% in the first quarter of 2025, following a downwardly revised increase of 0.4% in the fourth quarter of 2024. Household consumption spending contributed to the marginal growth supported by durable goods, non-durable goods and services. Mulman says investment spending remains low.
We also note that fixed investment contracted in the first quarter of this year, and private sector fixed investment was the weakest since 2021, which is of course a concern in terms of expanding capacity and expanding employment in the economy in due course. This is a relief, but at the same time it doesn't entirely remove our concerns around downside risks to this year's growth.
Young people, especially women in South Africa, should seize opportunities and carve out space in the science, technology and engineering sectors. This plea came from the Minister in the Presidency, Sindisiwe Chikunga. She was speaking at the official launch of the 2025 Youth Month at the Hector Peterson Memorial in Soweto. The year marks the 49th anniversary of the 16 June Soweto Uprising. Chikunga says while challenges persist, particularly in the STEM fields, there has been undeniable progress.
Over 60% of graduates from our colleges at universities are today women. This is a change because in my lifetime as a woman, matric was your ultimate goal. Today, women are accessing tertiary education. We've done well when it comes to education, and I think this is a story that we need to talk about.
European shares slid along with U.S. stock futures while the dollar lingered around a 6-week low as erratic U.S. trade policies clouded market sentiment and investors turned defensive ahead of key developments later in the week. U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping will probably speak this week, days after Trump accused Beijing of violating an agreement to roll back tariffs and trade restrictions. The call between the two leaders will be closely watched by markets which have been roiled by tariff-induced trade tensions between the world's two largest economies that continue to simmer. Let's have a look at financial indicators at this hour. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 Naira 580. In Botswana, 13 Pula 27. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 4. Zambia, 26 Kwacha 74. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 Real 66. Russia, 78 rubles 88. India, 85 rupee 58. China, 7 yuan 19. South Africa, 17 rand 86 cents. $1 is 73 pence to the British pound, 87 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $3,364. Platinum at $1,079 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $65.41 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email at www.channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9.
A Mauritanian appeals court has this week handed down a 15-year prison sentence and a hefty $3 million fine to the country's former president Mohamed Ould Abdel Aziz for corruption, money laundering and illicit self-enrichment. The ruling upholds and escalates an earlier conviction from 2023, marking a significant moment moment in Mauritania's efforts to tackle high-level corruption.
In terms of the country fighting corruption, I think this case shows the seriousness of the country in trying to fight corruption. There is substantial evidence that indicates to the fact that he was corrupt. These cases are always very difficult to then be able to balance whether they're not politically motivated and also balancing the rule of law.
Nyasha Mpani, who's a project leader at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation in South Africa.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
Our G20 fact for this Wednesday is South Africa is currently holding the G20 presidency for the year 2025. This from December 1st, 2025 to November 30, 2025. The G20 theme for South Africa's presidency is solidarity, equality, sustainability. South Africa is the first African nation to hold the G20 presidency, and that's our G20 fact for this 4th of June.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
South Africa's automotive market is on the move again, and that's literally. The latest TransUnion South Africa Mobility Insights report shows a remarkable rebound in passenger vehicle sales, averaging 34,000 units a month in the first quarter of 2025. And these figures not seen in nearly a decade. So the question is, what's behind this upswing? Well, a combination of declining interest rates, increased access to retirement savings via the two-pot system, and better real wage growth. But it's not just the economy that's shifting. Consumer behavior is changing too, from younger buyers researching cars to TikTok to growing insurance gaps and new definitions of value. Now, the South African car market is changing lanes fast, and to unpack these trends that are reshaping the road ahead, we're now joined by Lee Naik, who's the Chief Executive Officer at TransUnion Africa. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
Okay, let's start with this headline figure. New car sales are at their highest since 2015. What's the biggest economic and behavioral factors, do you think, that are driving this shift?
I think a lot has happened over the last year. In fact, we've had 5 quarters, Peter, of growth from a new vehicle sales perspective, as reported by NAMSA. From an interest rate perspective, as you would note, we've just had a 0.25% interest rate decline just a few days ago. But this data is actually before that. We've had quite a few things that happened over the course of the last year. It links to the drawdowns from the two-part system. It links to people actually becoming a lot better educated on their financial health and starting to make better decisions. We've seen a different kind of behavior, Peter. Over the course of the last 5 months, we've seen that consumers have become a lot more educated about the purchases they make. In fact, for the first half of last year, we saw that they prefer to stay with used cars for a longer period of time. They've started to think less about chasing after a brand new car and asking themselves, can I afford to repay this debt to my bank or my lender? And this behavior starts to move into better behavior in half two and now most recently in quarter one. The behaviors of consumers are shifting. And as you said in your intro, the younger generations are starting to show their weight in terms of how car buying will happen in 2025.
I am curious, though, about this use of the two-part retirement system. In theory, this money is supposed to be helping them live through retirement. But if we're spending them on cars, is this now just delaying what's going to be a future problem, people running into cash flow issues?
Well, it is possible, but what is important to note that we did see a decline in the household debt to income ratio. The number came around 62% in quarter four compared to 0.4% higher the previous year. So people are starting to pay down debt. And for some people, they may have used accessing their savings to pay down debt, which was the intention at the outset, to create more liquidity for consumer households that are highly stressed. When 62% of the income we earn goes towards paying debt, it is a tough position to be in. So it's a balance. Some consumers have taken the benefit of buying a holiday for the December break or purchasing a new car. But the data we found in our latest report is a lot more revealing. Not everybody bought a car using finance, for example. We saw that the Chinese brands have now come into South Africa with much cheaper price points, and it may have been easier to buy a car cash versus using finance. It's a really interesting time as far as how the consumers are behaving right now.
Yeah, I have a daughter who's just bought a car, actually, and it's interesting to see what young people are doing in terms of shopping for cars. What sort of trends have you been seeing through younger buyers in particular, especially vehicles?
Absolutely. I think the largest growth of vehicle sales in South Africa is coming from your generation Y and Z, and now the alphas as they come to the mainstream. And sadly, Peter, you and myself are not part of these younger generations like our daughters. They talk a different language, they show a different behavior. In fact, a large part of these consumers, like your daughter, probably bought the car because she saw an advert on TikTok versus seeing it on a billboard or on a TV advert. They're influenced by their peers. They're also influenced in realizing that a car is a way to achieve mobility versus a car being an object for display and for bragging about something that's material. So we've seen a different change in the consumers. In my personal opinion, when we have such high unemployment in South Africa, I'd like to believe that the youth are the most positive. In fact, in our last Consumer Pulse survey, we found that this same cohort of people are the most optimistic about South Africa's future. And I'd like to believe that the choices they're making to access mobility allows them to access job opportunities and to have a better quality of life.
Still with cars, the used car, the pre-owned vehicle market seems to be slowing a little bit, and new cars on the rise in a world and an environment where we're watching our belts. How do we explain this?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Peter. I think in a market like South Africa, in fact, a world stage that has huge economic challenges, we've seen the entry of quite a few brands, mostly from the Chinese market, that give many first-time buyers a chance to buy a car less than 200,000 Rand or 250,000 Rand. Suddenly you have a lot more options to access mobility, to move around. So one of the things that we track is the used to new car ratio. And we've seen that ratio get almost to the point where there's an equal number of used cars versus new cars that are being financed by our consumers. What that tells us very simply is that the type of deals available from dealerships in terms of the price point of the vehicle, maybe a year's free fuel, maybe access to servicing. Some of the brands are offering thousands of kilometers extra in free maintenance plans. It's becoming a lot more lucrative for new cars. I must make the point, Peter, we've been tracking this data for over 2 decades. Things do go in cycles. And I think the provocation right now is, it is tough right now. We are forecasting a better GDP growth for South Africa at 1.4%, but the challenges are real. And to get people into cars, the industry, from the OEMs to vehicle asset finance, are starting to be a lot more creative. In the end, the consumers are winning because they're able to access mobility. And as we've proven many times over, there's a direct correlation between transport poverty and financial poverty.
On the downside, though, it seems as if, and this is in your report, a worrying trend that there's a lot more uninsured drivers on our roads. And I guess this is a huge risk, not just for themselves, but lenders even, as well as insurers.
Absolutely. You know, we've been picking up this trend as far back as the pandemic. When you're under scrutiny from a household income perspective, one of the first things we look to do is cut insurance. The second thing is our satellite television and then our mobile contracts. The data is very clear on the behavior of consumers. What we're starting to see now is that vehicle finance houses are becoming a lot more creative in how they actually organize the sale of their vehicle. What you'll find going forward, Peter, is less a decoupling between the finance and the insurance. You may find that the funder of your vehicle requires you to have an active insurance, and they will track your ability to keep your insurance active. For you and I, having this many uninsured cars on the road is a danger to us and themselves. It promotes unworthiness of vehicles. And I think the provocation is now in an economy that's starting to show growth of vehicle sales. Like I said earlier, it allows some of the big banks and lenders to be quite creative as to how they make us safer while we have more cars entering the roads every day.
All right, and perhaps finally, I don't know if you can look into the future even more. Based on what we're seeing, what trends do you think will persist? And are some of these cyclical in nature that they'll fade and they'll resurface again in the future?
Well, absolutely. The entire industry is a cycle. So currently we're entering a new car cycle. You will find over the next 3 quarters that there'll be better deals available for you and I and our kids, Peter. That's a reality of how the cycle works. The second thing worth noting is that as the pressure for the new entrants, specifically from China, come into play, you may find that the traditional players from Japan, from France, from Germany, start a lot more creative with the deals that they put forward. So that's one trend in terms of the creativity of deals that consumers can expect. The second point linked to the behavior of your Generation Alpha daughter is the fact that kids don't actually want to own cars. And there's a growing trend called mobility as a service, Peter, where they will do something like subscribing to a vehicle for a period of time. They may use more of our ride sharing than actually want to have ownership. And that's the juxtaposition between buying a car that was too expensive and now finding cars that are in fact cheap enough, and you're able to get that really cheap as a once-off purchase. I think the next 3 quarters are quarters that actually will have the consumer seeing a lot more interesting deals for us to get us moving and participating in the economy.
Lee Naik, that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you so much indeed for this conversation. Fascinating insights that have come through in your report. Thanks for your time. All right, that was Lee Naik, who's the CEO of TransUnion Africa, giving us some insights into consumer behavior. And it was interesting watching exactly what he was talking about, because my daughter bought a car this week. I think it's getting delivered on Saturday. And the whole process, how they use social media to do the reviews and make up their minds. And there are so many different financial tools out there now to assist them. So that is a look at consumer behavior in South Africa through the lens of the TransUnion Africa's report. It is now time, Asanda, Beda, for the top of the hour.
Yes, we're already here. Next hour of Africa Rise and Shine. And if you've just joined us, well, welcome to the show. Lots to cover still. In this hour, we take a look at a Human Rights Watch report that's documented the Rwanda-backed M23 group summarily executing at least 21 civilians in Goma, and they were looking at the period of between February 22nd till February, I think it's 2022 to 2023. And then, of course, we'll be looking at Zimbabwean elephants. What's happening with that?
Yeah, there is a case of Zimbabwe issuing permits to cull at least 50 elephants, because you actually have to keep the population fixed so that there is, what do they call it? A sustainable conservancy.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense,
yes,
but we'll explain it all to you in this hour. But first, here's your news with Onele Nsinsi.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9.
A Mauritanian appeals court has this week handed down a 15-year prison sentence and a hefty $3 million fine to the country's former president, Mohammed.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective. SABC News. The African Perspective.
Why, thank you, Peter. Nigeria's Defense Chief of Staff General Christopher Musa has called for the country's borders with its 4 neighbors to be completely fenced to curb the entrance of armed groups amid escalating insecurity. Nigeria's military has been strained by widespread security issues, particularly a 16-year insurgency in the northeast that's led by Islamist militant group Boko Haram and its offshoot Islamic State West Africa province. Security forces and civilians have been attacked and killed, and tens of thousands of people have been displaced. Nigeria shares borders with Niger Republic, Cameroon, Benin and Chad, which are also grappling with escalating militant campaigns across the Sahel. The former Democratic Republic of Congo President Joseph Kabila met with women and youth associations to discuss efforts to restore peace across the country. During the meeting, Kabila expressed his commitment to re-establishing stability for the Congolese people and bringing an end to the ongoing conflict, particularly in the eastern regions of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The associations pledged their support and participation in the pursuit of lasting peace. Channel Africa's Jamie Bakoromera reports from Goma.
The president welcomed his awareness and reaffirmed his willingness to support a youth who is aware, engaged and agent of changement. Until now, the Tshisekedi regime continues to blame former President Joseph Kabila for being a great founder of the AFC M23 rebels, which according to Kinshasa causes insecurity in the eastern part of the country, calling him a collaborator and leader of this political and military movement. For his part, former President Joseph Kabila also judged the Kinshasa government for sowing terror among civilians and prioritizing injustice and the dictatorship in the DRC.
South Africa's Umkhonto we Sizwe party leadership has redeployed its Secretary General Flo Shivambu to Parliament. Shivambu says he has accepted the national leadership's decision to redeploy him. He says thanked the party's national leadership for the opportunity to be the party's national organizer and Secretary General.
I want to confirm that the national officials have taken a decision which I fully accept as a disciplined member of Umkhonto we Sizwe. We've been redeployed to the National Assembly and will continue to play the role of advancing the agenda and program of Umkhonto we Sizwe.
A group of more than 100 black senior professionals in the U.S. have praised South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa for the manner in which he handled his meeting with President Donald Trump last month. The group also spent a year at Harvard University in the Advanced Leadership Initiative program, examining issues around income inequality, human rights and social justice in the U.S. and across the world. Kailihle Kumalo reports.
In a statement released by the Charles Ogletree Black Alley alumni, the association says President Cyril Ramaphosa and his team managed a potentially difficult situation with aplomb and diplomatic grace. It says Ramaphosa made an important statement at the time of global tension over the validity of diversity, equity and inclusion and the global commitment to the rule of law. The group further says the South African leader represented not only South Africa but the entire continent and painted a picture of a vibrant continent rooted in the rule of law and working for economic growth and social well-being. They stressed that Africa should continue with AGOA with the US as a strong trading partner.
And lastly, the UN Security Council could vote as early as today on a new draft resolution demanding an immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, respected by all the parties. The initiative of the elected 10 members of the Council seeks a vote by the 15-member Council, where a US veto is likely to again loom large. Even if the text is adopted, enforcing implementation will be a high bar to achieve, given the parties' intransigence to date and Israel's insistence that Hamas be completely defeated before ending the war. Sean Bryce Peace reports.
The latest effort in the Council comes amid a catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza and what the UN Secretary-General earlier described as the unthinkable loss of life in the enclave. The draft text up for a vote would also demand the release of all the hostages held by Hamas and other groups, and the immediate lifting of all restrictions on the entry of humanitarian aid in Gaza and its distribution at scale, including through United Nations mechanisms that have been hampered by stringent Israeli restrictions. Security Council resolutions are legally binding on all member states and must receive at least 9 votes in favour and no vetoes from permanent members to pass.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Coming up in your sports news this hour, Banyana defeat Zambia by 2-0 to be crowned winners of the Tri-Nations Series, while Carlos Alcaraz moves into the semi-finals of Roland Garros, where he will meet Lorenzo Musetti for a place in the final. Details coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Beda bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
7 minutes past 7 Central African Time on Africa Rise and Shine. Let's talk about a Human Rights Watch report that's documented the Rwanda-backed M23 group that they summarily executed at least 21 civilians in Goma on February 22nd to February 23rd. Their actions, which included targeting residents in Kasika and other neighborhoods, raise serious war crimes concerns. To discuss the findings and their broader implications, we cross to Human Rights Watch senior Great Lakes researcher Clementine de Montoya. Clementine, thank you for joining us on Africa Rise and Shine. How are you on this Wednesday?
Thanks for having me. I'm good, thank you.
How did the Human Rights Watch verify that the M23 rebels deliberately executed these civilians instead of them being collateral casualties?
So we've been conducting research for several months on the events that took place on February 22nd and 23rd. We did a number of interviews with witnesses from the neighborhood, as well as relatives of victims to confirm identities of victims. We also analyzed and verified and geolocated a number of photographs and videos that we were sent showing some of the bodies of the victims. In one case, the body of a victim being pulled onto a truck and taken to a morgue. Videos also showing bodies being taken inside a morgue. So we used a number of different methods to confirm the events that took place, and as you said, to confirm the circumstances of people's deaths, which matters very much. There's no indication that there was fighting taking place between the belligerent parties to the conflict when these people were killed, and a number of them were killed with a bullet to the head or to the chest, which indicates that the executions were deliberate, and this is what leads us to conclude that these could very possibly be war crimes.
What do you know why it was residents of Kasika and other neighborhoods found in your report that were specifically targeted?
So this report specifically focuses on the Kasika neighborhood itself, and the information that we have is that it's a neighborhood that is just next to the Katindo military camp, which was formerly used by the Congolese army when the Congolese army was in control of Goma. And we were told that M23 possibly went to the neighborhood responding to reports of presence of Congolese soldiers and Wazalendo soldiers, who are the fighters of the coalition of armed groups that's allied to the Congolese army. And what we saw from witness accounts is that a number of pickup trucks filled with M23 fighters were deployed to the Kasika neighborhood on the afternoon of February 22nd. They started pulling young men out of their houses and from the streets. A number of them were executed on the streets. Some were just taken away. And we geolocated and verified a video showing the bodies of 11 young men who'd been executed in a construction site just next to Katindo military camp. The next morning, on February 23rd, the M23 rounded up a lot of young men and executed 3 that tried to escape. And we verified and geolocated a video showing the young men rounded up and guarded by M23 fighters, including one who was wearing a red armband, which we believe means he belongs to the M23's military police unit. These people, we were told, were taken away for training.
What judicial mechanisms exist to investigate and prosecute commanders responsible for these executions?
So, I mean, as you say, commanders can be held accountable for the actions of fighters under their command, not only if they've committed abuses, but if they should have known about the abuses being taking place and haven't tried to punish them. The ICC, International Criminal Court prosecutor, announced late last year that the ICC was renewing its investigations into crimes committed in North Kivu province in eastern Congo, especially since early 2022, just after the M23's resurgence. So our main call to the ICC is to include these executions of civilians in its investigations to ensure that those responsible are held accountable. What does the coordinated arrival of fighters in the pickup trucks reveal about the M23's command and what they intend to do and continue to do? So what this indicates for us is that these aren't the actions of a few rogue fighters. There seem to be a kind of deliberate operation in place, sending multiple fighters to different parts of the neighborhood. As you said, several pickup trucks filled with M23 fighters show some level of coordination to the operation, which again, combined with the absence of reports of fighting between the belligerent parties and the nature of the wounds that we recorded on the victims, indicates that this could rise to the level of war crimes. Let's talk now in terms of your report and the evidence that you've gathered and how this will help in the fight against insurgents and the international community's response. Have you gotten any of that? I think that the international community's response to the conflict in Eastern Congo has been very slow. There has been more concerted pressure on both Rwanda and Congo's governments that support abusive armed groups since January, since the M23 captured Goma, and then February when they captured Bukavu, the provincial capital of South Kivu. But overall, the response has been too weak in our opinion. We need to see more concerted action and pressure on both Rwanda and Congo to end their support to these abusive armed groups, to prioritize protection of civilians and ensuring humanitarian aid can reach those who need it, and also to prioritize justice. We're seeing the US now attempting to broker a peace deal between Rwanda and Congo, but we're concerned that there doesn't seem to be any focus on ensuring that justice is a key tenet of that agreement, and that those responsible for the crimes that have been committed in recent years are held accountable. We'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much, Clementine. We appreciate your time and your insights. Thanks very much. Thank you. Clementine de Montjoy, Human Rights Watch Senior Great Lakes Researcher, talking to us on Africa Rise and Shine.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Zimbabwe is once again in the spotlight over its controversial decision to cull elephants. Now, the country's wildlife authorities have approved the killing of at least 50 elephants at the Save Valley Conservancy in the southern lowveld of the country, which they say is facing unsustainable elephant overpopulation. And the reserve is designed to carry around 800 elephants, is currently home to more than 2,500 of them. So it's meant to only have 800 elephants, but there looks like triple the number, more than triple the number. This is not the first time Zimbabwe has resorted to culling in this regard. Well, to unpack the latest developments, we're now joined by our correspondent in Zimbabwe, John Kasim. Hello, John. Thanks for joining us. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Give us a little bit more about the situation at Save Valley Conservancy. How serious is this issue of overpopulation, and what are the environmental impacts actually of having such a large herd in a small area for them?
This issue, according to the ecological experts, is sort of an ongoing thing, and it's growing in Zimbabwe. By the way, Zimbabwe is second, I think, from Botswana in having one of the largest elephant herds in Africa. So the elephants are scattered across the country. The biggest is within the Kavango area, and then that's also putting into effect Hwange National Park and then Save Conservancy. So Save Conservancy, according to the reports, it has 2,500 plus elephants, yet they are supposed to be having about 800 elephants. That's what the habitat can hold. But now they are saying they want to cull about 50 elephants so that they reduce the number. The elephants are destroying the habitat, and that is becoming a danger to themselves as well as the environment. But this is not the first time, like you rightly said, that we have heard the government talking about culling of elephants and trying to create space for other animals, like small animals as well. So in 2023, we heard government talk about culling, and that exceeded into 2024. We started hearing of elephants being killed, mostly in Hwange National Park and within the communities, like problem animal control. But we don't know yet whether the 200 elephants that they wanted to kill then are now these 50 reduced from 200. We don't know about that fact, and whether the 200 that they talked about a year and a half ago, they also killed those animals. So it's sort of a broken record now that they continue talking of culling, yet we don't even see the evidence that they have culled and what then happens to the ivory. So a lot of people are concerned about continuous reports that they want to cull, yet nothing happens on the ground, or no reports of the actual culling is actually given at the end of the day.
So the culling is one thing, the ivory is another. But there was talk of the meat being distributed to drought-hit communities. Is that something that is being done and considered, that elephant meat will be given to people to eat?
It's something that the government has always been considering, but the problem now is that the communities themselves, they've actually discovered that whenever an elephant is killed within their community, for instance, in Hwange National Park, last year, we saw it was drought, and a lot of people within the communities really needed meat. They needed this protein. And so what was then happening is that elephants were being killed within the communities. It started with Victoria Falls, then Hwange, and Cholocho. And most of these elephants, whenever they were killed, we saw some stampede of communities rushing to get some piece of meat there, because the police would actually come and surround the animals so that the community does not have a fair share of what they are supposed to be getting. Most of the meat was going to the so-called chefs, including the police, and this actually angered most communities. Hence, right now, as we are speaking, there is no trust that if the government is to continue with their culling exercise, the meat is going to reach the beneficiaries as they are saying. So Zimbabweans are very pessimistic about this call, and that the meat is going to the communities. They don't know that government is serious or not, because in the past we've seen the meat has not been going to the communities.
John, we're going to have to leave it there. That's certainly a story to be watching in the coming days. That's John Kasim, our correspondent, reporting there from Harare on this conservancy move by the Zimbabwean authorities to cull more than 50 elephants.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
South Africa's Western Cape High Court has ruled that Parliament acted unconstitutionally in appointing impeached former Judge President Dr. John Hlophe, now Deputy President of the Umkhonto weSizwe or MK political party, to the Judicial Service Commission or JSC. Corruption Watch was one of the organizations that challenged the decision. For more on the ruling, we're now joined by Karam Singh, a consultant at Corruption Watch and former executive director of the organization. Karam, thank you for joining us and good morning to you from Rise and Shine.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me on the program.
We appreciate your time. The court ruled that Hlophe is unsuitable for the role because of his previous impeachment by the commission. Why did Corruption Watch join the legal challenge against Hlophe's JSC appointment?
Well, I mean, I think it was, in aid of ensuring that, that we have a well-functioning democracy that's consistent with the principles of the rule of law. The issues that led to a former Judge Hlophe's impeachment were absolutely significant. It's the first time in post-democracy South Africa we had such a senior judicial figure being impeached for defeating the ends of justice and other forms of gross misconduct. That does not preclude Mr. Hlophe from having a life outside of the judiciary. It did not preclude him from being able to join the MK party and then take a seat up in Parliament. But for him to then take a seat up at the Judicial Services Commission, I think really would have flown in the face of the basis upon which he was removed as a justice in the first place. It would have been irrational. It would not have been. He through his conduct disqualified himself from being able to take up that type of position. This was a position that Corruption Watch and many others, including the other applicants in the case, put before the court, and this was a decision ultimately. This was ultimately the finding of the Constitutional Court.
Are there any other ways that Hlophe's presence on the JSC is seen as a threat to judicial integrity? You mentioned there are other gross ways that he conducted himself, misconduct.
I mean, I think just, there are a range of allegations and misconduct surrounding the tenure of Judge Hlophe. Ultimately, that led to his impeachment. That in and of itself disqualified him from being engaged in future activities which would lead to the choice of judges. So the very fact that he was impeached, quite an extreme measure, that he was removed from the bench, means that it would have been irrational for him to then be involved in processes which would lead to the choice of future judges. His conduct excluded himself from being engaged in those processes going forward.
How does the ruling reflect on Parliament's handling of its constitutional duties and also the principles that are at stake with this particular case?
Well, it shows that the decisions of Parliament must be consistent with principles of rationality and the rule of law. That just because somebody takes up a seat as an MP in Parliament doesn't necessarily mean that they can be deployed to any of the various committees or the other functions that are responsible for Parliament. So I think Parliament will have to study the judgment very carefully, and they'll have to reflect upon the implications of it for their future decisions in terms of decisions such as these, in terms of who sits on different committees, who takes up different responsibilities in terms of the legislative mandate.
Yes, and the case is unprecedented, as you point to. So what does this judgment set for future appointments to oversight bodies as possible guidance?
I think that there's a context in which appointments are made, in which people are placed in different committees. The fact that they are a sitting MP in and of itself doesn't necessarily qualify them to sit on these committees, and that Parliament must take this judgment under their review and consider it. It becomes part of the decision calculus then in terms of who gets deployed to sit on what committees, particularly in terms of the functioning of government in terms of the different spheres, in terms of how the judiciary functions, and in terms of the legislative role in terms of oversight of the judiciary.
Can Dr. Hlophe and the Umkhonto weSizwe political party appeal this decision? And do you see it even reaching as far as the Constitutional Court?
Well, no, this was a decision of the Constitutional Court. This was a decision of the highest court of the country. So this is the end of the road. There is no further appeal here. This is the case is finished here.
How does this decision support judicial independence in South Africa? And we'll speak about political power and influence on that as well, because the case was brought about by the DA initially.
The independence of the judiciary is sacrosanct. We need to ensure for the integrity of the rule of law, for confidence in the system. We need to have a strong and independent judiciary. But that independence exists within a situation of codependence. So appointments are made by the other branches. There's a process by which those appointments are confirmed. So while the judiciary, in terms of the exercise of its mandate, is independent, we have to understand that it exists within a system of interdependence, including how it receives its funding and its budget from the state.
As it speaks to political opposition, what does it reflect in terms of the duties and power of political opposition in the country to uphold the rule of law? As we mentioned, the case was brought forward as part of the DA's legal challenge against this designation of Dr. Hlophe.
We have a government of national unity. We have opposition parties residing within cabinet. We have an election this year which did not deliver an outright absolute majority to a particular party. So I think we're going to continue to see a contestation around decisions which come from Parliament. Hopefully, the multi-party democracy leads to a more robust engagement and greater accountability when it comes to the decisions. We don't have a single overriding majority party that can just run the show. So I think it speaks well that we have a constitution which can be litigated, that these cases can be brought before the Constitutional Court. And I think, in this case, the Constitutional Court also, in terms of exercising their mandate as the apex court, as an independent constitutional body, has served the country well and served the Constitution well in terms of this decision.
And civil society's role, what can they play in safeguarding constitutional accountability moving forward?
Ultimately, civil society has a primary role to play in terms of advocacy, in terms of highlighting issues and challenges, contesting within the channels that are available. And I think in a lost case situation, we have the option of being able to engage in strategic litigation and bring cases before the courts for them to review when these matters can't be dealt with in the normal course of politics. So civil society has an active role to play, as does the media, in terms of highlighting challenges or errors when we see them, because if it wasn't for the challenge of the DA, of the Corruption Watch, of Freedom Under Law, then John Hlophe would be sitting in the Judicial Services Commission, and that would have been an abomination.
Karam, thanks again for your time. We really appreciate it here on Africa Rise and Shine.
Thank you so much.
Karam Singh is consultant and former executive director of Corruption Watch on that story. 7:30 Central African Time it is. Let's get our news headlines. Here's Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Nigeria's Defense Chief of Staff General Christopher Musa has called for the country's borders with its 4 neighbors to be completely fenced in order to curb the entrance of armed groups amid escalating insecurity. Zimbabwe has issued permits to cull at least 50 elephants on a reserve where there are 3 times more elephants than the habitat can sustain. This is according to wildlife authorities in the country. And Lee Jae-myung has been sworn in as South Korea's 21st president, having won a clear victory in yesterday's election. Channel Africa News, I'm Onel Ntsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's get you another sports update. Good morning, Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning once again from the Sports Desk. So Banyana wrapped up their 3 Nations Challenge Series in style on Tuesday afternoon. This defeating Zambia 2-0 at the Lucas Masterpieces Marembe Stadium in the country's capital city, Pretoria, in a tightly contested and often physical clash between the 2 regional neighbours. After a goalless first half, the South African senior national team stepped up the intensity in the second half, with Bongega Gamede breaking the deadlock in the 74th minute with a stunning free kick. Her goal and a first goal for the Banyana side. The momentum stayed with Banyana and Jermaine Siopasin, who had doubled the lead in the 82nd minute to secure the win as well as the tournament title. Reflecting on that performance, Dr. Desiree Ellis commended her players for sticking to the game plan while also highlighting areas that still need to be improved ahead of their WAFCON title defence in July in Morocco.
Today, this was a true team effort. I think we stuck to the game plan. We denied them space. We moved the ball around quickly. And I think that's what got us, we settled down better. We pressed them when they had the ball. And those were some of the things that we worked on. But we still have a lot of work to do. There were some moments where they got behind us. We need to be better at that. Some moments, especially in the middle of the park, we gave the ball away unnecessarily. Late in the second half, we did some silly things at the back. And we need to manage that better, play the game in there off. But other than that, happy with the performance. So
Zambia, who came into this fixture after a 1-1 draw with Botswana a few days ago, posed a tough test for Banyana throughout the game. Their coach Nora Hoptel admitted that her side struggled to convert key moments into goals.
Well, I think the first half belonged to us. I think we had a good control in defence, in a mid-press, entered into some good transitions out of it. At the moment today, we just missed this absolutely danger, this Kukakata. We have not been in the last pass precise enough. So we should use one of these transitions and play it a bit out better. I think in second half it was a bit an open game on both sides.
On to this now, defending champion of the French Open, Carlos Alcaraz produced a dominant display to beat 12th seed Tommy Paul and reach the semi-finals at Roland Garros. The second seed needed only 53 minutes to establish a 2-set lead, losing only 1 game in the process. American Paul offered plenty of resistance during the more competitive third set, but Alcaraz broke again for a 5-4 lead and quickly wrapped up 6-3, 6-love, 6-1, 6-4 victory. The Spaniard will face 23-year-old Lorenzo Musetti for a place in Sunday's final. The Italian 8th seed defeated Francis Taifo 6-2, 4-6, 7-5 and 6-2 earlier on Tuesday and is into a Grand Slam semi-final for the second time in his career, having reached the Wimbledon last 4 in 2024. Taifo, the first American to feature in a French Open quarter-final for 22 years, fought back to take the second set after Musetti dominated the opener, but the 15 seed fell away after losing a grilling third set and could not keep up with Musetti's graceful but punishing style of play. While world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka will face 3-time defending champion Iga Swiatek in a blockbuster French Open semi-final between 2 title contenders. Sabalenka aced a tight quarter-final against China's Olympic champion Zhang Qian 7-6 and 6-3 on a blustery court Philippe Cartier on Tuesday. Now Poland's Swiatek then came through 6-1, 7-5 against Elina Svitolina to set up a fascinating last four encounter. Belarusian Sabalenka replaced fifth seed Swiatek at the top of the world rankings in October of last year. The pair have made 12 times with Swiatek leading head-to-head 8-4, but have not met at a major since 2022 at the US Open semi-finals. Swiatek has won 4 of the past 5 Roland Garros titles, while Sabalenka is bidding for her first Paris trophy. For all that, Swiatek has dominated the French Open in recent years. Sabalenka, though, is the player to beat this time around. She has won 3 titles this year, including one on the Madrid clay, and also reached the 2 further finals, as well as strengthening her grip at the top of the rankings. And finally, back home, the eThekwini municipality in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province says preparations for the 98th Comrades Marathon are in full swing. The biggest sporting event on the South African calendar is scheduled for the 8th of June. That's, of course, this coming Sunday. This year will be a down run from Pietermaritzburg to Durban. The city's Gugu Silelana says they have activated a comprehensive operational plan to ensure a spotless as well as a welcoming environment for the ultramarathon.
The plan is part of a broader city beautification and readiness program coordinated across multiple departments to ensure that Durban is on top form for the runners. CSW will be cleaning the entire eThekwini boundary from Cato Ridge to the Mosmeda Stadium's People's Park, ensuring that all waste is collected and the route remains litter-free after the race. In addition, waste receptacles will be strategically placed along the route to encourage responsible disposal from the spectators.
And that's a wrap from the Sports Desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +27 11714 4459. Back with more sports news in the next hour for Channel Africa Sport. I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Révérend Dr Alain.
Je suis très heureux d'être de la partie ce soir et bonjour à tous nos auditeurs.
Je rappelle que pour les intimes, il vous appelle bien sûr BMB. Aujourd'hui, nous parlons courage sur Mix Vibration. Comment définissez-vous le terme courageux?
Ça vient du latin corps, qui veut tout simplement exprimer la bravoure, la force de l'âme ou encore la virilité, le héroïsme que quelqu'un peut avoir en face de difficultés, en face de problèmes, en face de défis.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of business now. Here's Chanduko Ligeke with the details.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. The South Sudan's economy is facing major challenges, with the war in that country making the situation worse. Oil exports are under threat, with major investors pulling out and international loans drying up. Internal government dysfunction is also contributing to the crisis. An expert on Sudan and South Sudan and associate professor at the Center for Peace and Security at Coventry University, John Prospisil, weighs in.
Interesting question is now why this year's budget for the first time even works with such a huge deficit and has these oil revenues for the first time actually at that low level, which is closer to reality than ever before. This is a valid question to ask, especially when you go historically through South Sudanese budgets, and given also the high level of corruption there, this budget is basically kind of numbers that are pretty random.
Mali has suspended artisanal gold mining activities during the June to September rainy season to protect workers from landslides. A spokesperson for the ministry says that meteorological services have forecast heavy rains from the 15th of June to the 30th of September. In March, the government suspended the granting of new artisanal mining permits to foreigners after a couple of accidents left dozens dead. Artisanal mining is a common activity across much of West Africa and has increased in recent years due to growing demand for the precious metal and rising prices. The South African Department of Minerals and Petroleum Resources, DMPR, has decreased fuel prices following the dismissal of Economic Freedom Fighters' fuel levy increase court challenge. The party argued in the Western Cape High Court that the Finance Minister, Ina Godongwana, took an incorrect approach in his decision to propose an increase in the general fuel levy. Godongwana announced the increase when he tabled the third revised budget in Parliament last month. The department's director for fuel pricing, Robert Make, says the changes which came into effect at midnight were influenced by several factors.
Both grades of petrol 93 and 95 octane will decrease by 5 cents a litre. Diesel will decrease by 36.9 cents a litre. Illuminating paraffin at retail level will decrease by 75 cents a litre. And LP gas will decrease by 89 cents per kilogram. The reason for these fuel price changes are as follows. The first one is the lower oil prices and stronger rand against the dollar during the period under review.
An economist at Standard Bank, Elna Moolman, has noted that while economic growth in South Africa outperformed the bank's stagnant projections, it remains too low. Data released by Statistics South Africa show that the economy grew marginally by 0.1% in the first quarter of 2025, following a downwardly revised increase of 0.4% in the fourth quarter of 2024. Household consumption spending contributed to the marginal growth supported by durable goods, non-durable goods and services. Moolman says investment spending remains low.
We also note that fixed investment contracted in the first quarter of this year, and private sector fixed investment was the weakest since 2021, which is of course a concern in terms of expanding capacity and expanding employment in the economy in due course. This is a relief, but at the same time it doesn't entirely remove our concerns around downside risks to this year's growth.
The U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order doubling the U.S. import tax on steel and aluminium to 50%, further disrupting the global trade. The tariff will come into effect within hours. The White House says it marks the new golden age. The BBC's Michelle Fleury has the details.
About a quarter of U.S. steel is imported, mostly from Canada and other close allies. But these higher tariffs won't necessarily hit foreign producers. If they decide to pass it on, US factories that rely on these imported metals could see costs rise too, which means higher prices for American businesses and consumers. Sounding the alarm, groups representing global aerospace companies and US airlines. They have warned that the new duties on imported commercial aircraft, jet engines and parts could put air safety and the supply chain at risk.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 580. In Botswana, 13 pula 27. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 4. Zambia, 26 kwacha 74. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 66. Russia, 78 rubles 88. India, 85 rupee 58. China, 71 19. South Africa, 17 rand 86 cents. $1 is 73 pence to the British pound and 87 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $3,350, platinum at $1,080 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil, $65.37 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Bringing you the energy news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Now, the humanitarian crisis in Sudan continues to deepen, with the aid workers now increasingly in the crosshairs. The United Nations World Food Programme, WFP, and UNICEF have strongly condemned a deadly attack on a joint humanitarian convoy near Al-Khoma in northern Darfur. Now, the attack, which occurred on Monday evening, left 5 aid workers dead and several others injured. Multiple trucks were burned and essential supplies meant to reach some of Sudan's most vulnerable were destroyed. And as fighting rages on between Sudan's rival military factions, humanitarian agencies in the region say that they're being forced to suspend or scale back operations in areas particularly in most need. Well, to help us unpack the latest tragedy and the needs, we're now joined by Eva Hines, who's the Chief of Advocacy and Communication at UNICEF in Sudan. Eva, thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much and good morning to everybody.
I suppose let's first get a sense of just how much we know exactly about what happened with this tragedy, this horrific attack near Al-Khoma. What do we know?
Well, we know this was a convoy made up of 15 trucks, and it was on its way to reach children and families in famine-stricken El Fasher, and particularly the El Fasher town, which is the capital of North Darfur. It was carrying life-saving food and nutrition supplies, and it had been making its way there for a long time already. And then in Al-Khoma on Monday, very late, it was attacked. And very tragically, 5 members of this convoy were killed and several more people were injured. And there were several trucks that were damaged, and as well as some supplies. So of course this is a very tragic attack, as well as it's an appalling attack, because this is something that should never happen, that no convoy should ever be a target.
So, I mean, the convoy very clearly marked. There's no mistaking that it's humanitarian aid. Was this a deliberate attack? I mean, in terms of was the convoy targeted because they're humanitarian, or was it just perhaps they were looking for supplies and you just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time?
Well, I'm no military expert here, so the only thing that I can tell you that it is standard with any humanitarian convoy that we do share the routes in advance. The parties on the ground are notified and they're aware of the location of the trucks. And under international humanitarian law, any convoy like this, it must be protected. And the parties have an obligation to facilitate a rapid and unimpeded passage so that we can deliver aid to humanitarians in need.
Tell us a bit more about the supplies and how critical they are to those that were meant to receive them.
These supplies were very critical. I can tell you that the UNICEF trucks that were part of this convoy, they were carrying life-saving nutrition supplies. So this means, for example, ready-to-use therapeutic food for children that are suffering from severe acute malnutrition. And this is the deadliest form of malnutrition, and it can be deadly if not treated early on. It was carrying health supplies, medicine, education supplies. It was carrying water, sanitation, and hygiene supplies. These are all very critical supplies for very vulnerable children in an area that's very difficult to access. And Al Fasher is an area that's been in the middle of the fighting for a very long time already, so there's a lot of vulnerabilities there. There are many people that have very limited or no access to safe and clean water or to health care or to good nutrition, to any of these services. So it underscores why it is so important that this type of convoys make its way to these people.
And given this latest attack, I guess you have to review your operations in Darfur, either getting extra protection, or does this feel like there may be some no-go areas at all?
Well, we remain on the ground. We are very committed to stay and to deliver for these children and for the families. And despite the insecurity, so we are staying. But of course, at the same time, we are calling for a safe and secure operating conditions because it is of the utmost importance, and it is linked to the international humanitarian law, and we are calling for all the parties to respect it.
Have you received any feedback at all from the Sudanese authorities and maybe even the RSF that are fighting the army at the moment?
Well, our focus here is very much the children at all the corners of Sudan. This is a country at war, a country that's been ravaged by war for 2 years now. So our focus is very much to make sure that we get aid wherever these children are, anywhere in this country.
Are these kinds of incidents increasing? Was this sadly one that has happened but is not often happening in this conflict?
Well, we've seen attacks on humanitarian staff. We've seen attacks on operations, and I think it underscores yet again why it is so important to call out to ensure that these attacks end immediately, that no hospital, no health center, no school, no water point, no convoy, these should never be targets. They should always be protected, the same way as civilians should be protected, whether we're talking about children, families, aid workers. So under international humanitarian law, they shouldn't be targets. They should be protected.
Is there anything that you can do to protect your humanitarian workers?
Well, we are doing everything we can. As mentioned, this is the reason why we do share these routes in advance. We inform the parties on the ground, and we take every measure we can to make sure the people who are part of the convoy that they stay safe.
All right, and perhaps finally, do you have a message to the international community about the risks that your teams are having to face and what support you urgently need now?
Well, this is a conflict where we are seeing the needs go up, and if we just look at last year and compare it to this year, so the needs on the ground are increasing by 20%. So there's a large number of people who are in need, and I think that underscores why it is so important that we are here and we are able to deliver for these vulnerable children and families. And we need all hands on deck. We need support, we need resources, and we definitely cannot leave these children alone. That we need to be able to stay here, and we are calling for support to call for an end to the fighting, an end to the attacks. And I would just like to underscore that ultimately the most vulnerable children here, the thing that they need the most is for the fighting to end.
Eva, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very, very much indeed for your time and the work that you and your teams are doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's Eva Hines, who's the Chief Advocacy and Communication at the United Nations World Food Programme in Sudan, talking about these tragic attacks on humanitarian convoys.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
As South Africa prepares to commemorate 2025 Youth Month, the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, in collaboration with the National Youth Development Agency, or NYDA, the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, DSAC, have launched the 2025 Youth Month at the Hector Peterson Memorial in Soweto, Johannesburg. Youth Month will be commemorated under the theme Skills for the Changing World, Empowering Youth for Meaningful Economic Participation. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe spoke to Lerato Masondo, a young woman from Soweto, to get her thoughts on this event and challenges faced by the youth at large.
These initiatives are important based on the fact that most youth are struggling to actually access the correct websites as to getting job opportunities, internships, because us as youth, we do go to schools, but we don't get more information about these sectors. The 21 sectors, yes, we know about it, but we don't have the broader explanation of what they deal with. So they are giving us access to learnerships, internships, as to how do we go about to having opportunities like this for our youth.
At the heart of this, a lot of youth are struggling to keep up with their life. Can you share with us maybe some of the experiences that you've gone through yourself as a young person, but also the friends that you spend most of the time with who are also on the same page with yourself?
So most of our youth are fallen into crime, drugs, and some of them are inside relationships that are abusive because of their lack of information of these opportunities. So I had a friend while I was doing my career, which was in Mlapo TVET College, who was from Eastern Cape. So when she came to this, she was seeking for accommodation from NSFAS. But then our schools are failing us by them having to choose certain candidates who qualify for those, despite of the need of some candidates and where they come from. So she started having to rent outside, which by the NSFAS doesn't want to pay for other tenants that are not under their organization, which became a struggle. So she ended up having to quit and sit down and do absolutely nothing, whereby she comes from very far, which this I feel like the government has failed her. And these are the challenges that even the government is failing to address in most colleges, universities. Hence we are experiencing bigger strikes about the payment of these fundings, because they are prolonging our payments, and then most students end up sitting because they don't have the enough resources, or rather the payments to pay for these institutions. But then this is killing our youth, because some of our youth are skilled, some of our youth are talented, but then we are failed by the government to actually express who we really are and what we are capable of.
The importance also of celebrating Youth Month. Do you know actually why we celebrate the month of June as a youth month in South Africa?
Yes, I do. This was in 1976 during the apartheid time, when the students was striving for equality between the blacks and whites. So we had the challenges to say most students, the blacks, were not privileged enough, were not given the privilege to actually have access to more opportunities. Even the transportation to those opportunities was difficult because the whites were more privileged to get into that. So June 16, we're celebrating them as to thanking them for the democracy that they gave us to have access to these opportunities, these sectors, where despite of our race and religion, but then we believe in a community that is united and building.
Your message to your fellow youth on grabbing these opportunities that government is presenting, but also what are you asking the government to do more over the issues that you have complained about?
Okay. So to the youth, it's actually don't give up. There's actually the world is broader. You can actually explore anything. Even if I know at the studio we are tired because of the government is failing us having to meet the opportunities that we want, but there are sectors, there are places where you can go and get help. So take that opportunities, ask, because I feel us as youth, we don't ask enough. We are sitting and don't want to explore broader about such opportunities. If you find a post that says there's an opportunity, such sectors, such community centers, they are bigger and everywhere, go there, find who you are, strive for what you want. Then the government, can it please actually help us with opening such sectors so that we can have more experience about what we should do, how we go about it, because I feel like we do know that we have learnerships, we have the struggle to say you study, yes, but then having access to the learnerships, it becomes a struggle. So can the department and the government itself have sectors, or rather organizations, where they explain and give TVET colleges, even the universities, such opportunities to study about these sectors more?
That was Michael Mbewe speaking to Lerato Masondo on challenges facing youth in South Africa ahead of Youth Day. It's Youth Month in the country. Youth Day will be 16th of June that we commemorate in South Africa. And that's as we enter the third and final hour of Africa Rise and Shine. A very good morning to you. My name is Asanda Beda. We're coming to you from our Johannesburg studios live. If you've just joined us, thank you.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. Yes, indeed, streaming on the internet, www.channelafrica.co.za. And you can also catch us on your mobile app. Just look up SABC Plus, that's SABC Plus, and look for Channel Africa, and there you'll be able to carry us wherever you want to travel. So much to look into in this next half hour. One of the big issues is what's happening to human rights activists in East Africa. We'll be unpacking that with two activists, and they'll explain what's going on. But that's after the news with Onelin Sinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Nigeria's Defense Chief of Staff General Christopher Musa has called for the country's borders with its four neighbors to be completely fenced in order to curb the entrance of armed groups amid escalating insecurity. Nigeria's military has been strained by widespread security issues, particularly a 16-year insurgency in the northeast that's led by Islamist militant group Boko Haram and its offshoot Islamic State West Africa province. Security forces and civilians have been attacked and killed, and tens of thousands of people have been displaced. Nigeria shares borders with Niger Republic, Cameroon, Benin and Chad, which are all grappling with the escalating militant campaigns across the Sahel. The former Democratic Republic of Congo President Joseph Kabila met with women and youth associations to discuss efforts to restore peace across the country. During the meeting, Kabila expressed his commitment to re-establish stability for the Congolese people and bring an end to the ongoing conflict, particularly in the eastern region of the DRC. The associations pledged their support and participation in the pursuit of lasting peace. Channel Africa's Jimmy Bakomera reports from Goma.
The president welcomed his awareness and reaffirmed his willingness to support a youth who is aware, engaged and agent of changement. Until now, the Tshisekedi regime continues to blame former President Joseph Kabila for being a great founder of the AFC M23 rebels, which according to Kinshasa causes insecurity in the eastern part of the country, calling him a collaborator and leader of this political and military movement. For his part, former President Joseph Kabila also judged the Kinshasa government for sowing terror among civilians and prioritizing injustice and the dictatorship in the DRC.
South Africa's Umkhonto Sizwe party leadership has redeployed its Secretary General Flo Chivambu to Parliament. Chivambu says he accepts the national leadership's decision to redeploy him. He has thanked the party's national leadership for the opportunity to be the party's national organizer and Secretary General.
I want to confirm that the national officials have taken a decision which I fully accept as a disciplined member of Umkhonto Sizwe. We've been redeployed to the National Assembly and will continue to play the role of advancing the agenda and program of Umkhonto Sizwe.
Zimbabwe has issued permits to cull at least 50 elephants on a reserve where there are 3 times more elephants than the habitat can sustain. This is according to wildlife authorities in the country. The Save Valley Conservancy in southern Zimbabwe is said to be home to roughly more than 2,500 elephants, though it has a carrying capacity of 800 elephants. Channel Africa correspondent in Zimbabwe, John Kasim, explains.
Save Conservancy, according to the reports, it has 2,500 plus elephants, yet they are supposed to be having about 800 elephants. That's what the habitat can hold. But now they are saying they want to cully about 50 elephants so that they reduce the number. The elephants are destroying the habitat, and that is becoming a danger to themselves as well as the environment. But this is not the first time that we have heard the government talking about culling of elephants and trying to create space for other animals, like small animals as well.
Lastly, Lee Jae-myung has been sworn in as South Korea's 21st president, having won a clear victory in yesterday's election. Speaking through a translator at a scaled-down ceremony in the National Assembly in Seoul, he outlined his priorities in government. Lee also condemned the brief imposition of martial law late last year, repeatedly referring to it as an insurrection.
I will be working on the security of the country and the economy that has been demolished, as well as the democracy. And we need to work together and we'll try to make our country brighter.
Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, the Royal Challengers Bengaluru finally broke their IPL duck with a 6-run win over the Punjab Kings in the grand finale last night. And Nick Kyrgios will miss Wimbledon with an injury setback. Details coming up at 8:30.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
In recent weeks, East Africa has seen a disturbing rise in human rights violations, drawing regional and global concern. In Kenya, digital activist Rose Njeri was arrested under the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act after creating a tool for citizens to oppose the Finance Bill 2025. Her arrest on the 30th of May sparked public outrage and calls for her release. Meanwhile, in Tanzania, Kenyan activist Boniface Mwangi and Ugandan lawyer Agatha Atuhaire reported being detained, tortured and sexually assaulted by security officers whilst attending a court case for opposition leader in Tanzania Tundu Lissu. They were later abandoned near their respective borders, highlighting growing fears over cross-border repression and threats to human rights defenders. Well, to unpack these human rights violations, particularly against activists, I'm now joined by Wanjeri Ndoro, who's the president of the International Society for Human Rights in charge of East Africa. And we also have on the line Neto Agostino, co-leader of the United Green Movement Party and also a member of the President Maraga 2027 team. To both of you, thank you so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. And a very good morning.
Great. Let me start with you, perhaps, Wanjeri. And this is a question for both of you. Just your overall impressions and take on what we've seen in recent weeks. Is that an indicator of the general situation in the region for some time now?
Yes, indeed it is. Sorry. And it's actually worse than is being reported, really, because we are seeing a cross-border collaboration between Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania in suppressing, freedom of speech. We are seeing abductions and, even murders in some parts, especially in Kenya. We're having a lot of people who have been disappeared turning up dead. And what has happened is, if you notice, there have been claims or allegations, and I can say it is not an allegation because I was in the street last year during the protests, and some of the officers in the street were definitely not Kenyans, because we can tell from the accent that they are from across, in Uganda. And some of those people were in uniform, fighting or trying to get us off the street. And now we are seeing what is happening in Tanzania, where just a few months back, there was even collaboration between Tanzania and Kenyan police to abduct Maria Sarungi, who is an activist in exile here in Kenya. And she was disappeared for a few hours until we had to, create a ruckus, especially online, for her to be released. So yes, indeed, we are experiencing a very dangerous decline in our democracy as a country, and also as a region. We are seeing the three presidents tending to come together to make sure that, they silence their citizens.
Neto, you're finding the same, and is this escalating over time? Is it related to elections or just a general feeling that activists need to be silenced?
I think the presidents of East Africa are losing it. They're completely losing it. The East African community is catching a flu of dictatorship. We are watching derogability of human rights, contrary to, instruments like the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. The East African presidents have turned the region into a space where civic and political rights are supposed to be pies in the sky. They're thinking that it's privileges to the people, which goes counter to all those instruments that the countries have signed. Like Wanjeria said, looks like there's a bit of collaboration, because when we had the street protests in June 2024, I think, and it is true, some soldiers crossed borders. The people crossed borders and came and caused mayhem in Kenya, shot, killed, maimed people. Now, we watched. I was in Tanzania with my presidential candidate for 2027, the Honorable Chief Justice David Maraga. We were together to show solidarity with Tundu Lissu. And why were we showing solidarity? The Chama cha Mapinduzi in Tanzania is gone against its own code of conduct. They have an electoral code of conduct where they are actually saying that all political parties are going to have a free fair play. Free fair play is what is required in a democracy. Yet Tundu Lissu and his Chadema party are being stranglehold. They're not being given the space to participate, to talk. We've seen that happen in Uganda. What President Museveni is trying to do to the NUP party of Bobby Wine and Tim, that they're not allowed to even have gatherings. By-elections, like we watched the recent ones in Uganda, where there was chaos perpetrated by government police. In Kenya, for example, we've also seen the same repression. Some political party events are being broken into. Several political party leaders have been hounded out of office. This goes counter to those very instruments, the international civic and political rights that Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania are party to. It goes counter to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights that Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania are party to. It also goes counter to the East African community aspirations. So if we are going to be a community of persons, it does not make sense why Boniface Mwangi or Agatha Atuire, for example, would be arrested, detained, tortured in the way they were, especially if they're East African citizens. The sense of the community is that we're supposed to be one. We're supposed to be one family. The only reason why we have the boundaries, the only reason why there's Uganda and Tanzania is because of some colonialists. So to the extent that we've agreed to come to the community of East Africa, we should be having free movement of persons, free movement of goods, free movement of skills. And repression in Tanzania, as it is happening for Tundu Lissu, is repression in Kenya, is repression in Uganda. And the reason why, like I said, the Chief Justice David Maraga went to Tanzania to show solidarity is because if we leave Tanzanians on their own, like we think the Tundu Lissu election is nothing to do with Kenya, like I've said, Kenya will catch a flu, and even President Maraga's bid for 2027 would then not make sense, because that repression, having been played in Tanzania, will play again in Kenya, will play in Uganda. And that is why all East Africans must stand together in solidarity. So wherever there's violation in any part of East Africa, all of us who believe in human rights, all of us who believe in the rule of law, all of us who believe in constitutionalism must show up and must be there for the people of East Africa.
Wanjeri, it sounds as if there's more than just catching a flu from one country to the next. Some of the stories suggest agents from one country are allowed to get into another country to target people of interest for them.
Yes, that is indeed true. We saw this with Kizza Besigye. He was abducted in Kenya, and there is no way you can abduct somebody as high profile as Kizza Besigye if you do not have collaboration with the Kenyan police system. And he's not the only one. We have had issues with some Turkish guys and people who have come to Kenya to quote unquote, hide or even just to do their normal official business. Like Kizza Besigye was here for the launching of a book by one of our politicians, and he was abducted. And since then, he's been detained and is undergoing an illegal court-martial process. I mean, he's a civilian. What is he doing in a military court? But this wouldn't happen if Kenya is not aiding and abetting this behavior. And what is even worrying is the use, especially if you look at the whole Boniface Mwangi and Agatha story, we are finding they have openly declared that they were sexually abused. This is happening in Kenya too. We have an activist who was abducted and he was sexually abused, a male, by males on video, and they shared the video in order to silence him so that he stopped speaking about the corruption in Mombasa County. And when we see such tactics being used, it takes us back, especially Kenyans. We have had we tend to think of ourselves as having some sense of freedom in expressing ourselves. And it has been there, especially after Moi left Kenya. But now we are not having any freedom after we speak. We are getting threats. Personally, I have received even phone calls and messages telling me to shut up or I'll be, and it's happening to anybody who is being seen to be vocal. And where we are headed, as my colleague Neto says, is very scary, very scary. And I don't think we are headed there. We are already there. And what is interesting, it has to be noted that our President Ruto just last week apologized to the people and said, I am sorry to the young people. I am sorry for everything that is happening. And then the same week, we have the arrest of Njeri for coming up with a tool that is meant to help us do what we call public participation for the finance bill that is about to be tabled, and also the abduction of two men from a region called Elgeyo Marakwet, one in his 40s, one in his 20s, who were later found murdered in a mortuary in a different county this weekend. So it's still going on, even with the admittance by the president himself. I remember when he was campaigning to become president, he said one of the things he's not going to allow is abductions and enforced disappearances, illegal detentions. He said he's going to stop that. And this is on the background that just before they came into power, several bodies were being unearthed in a river called River Yala, that the former regime, that's how the former regime was dealing with whoever they termed as a criminal or whoever they felt did not deserve to live. They felt the need to kill them and dump them in this River Yala. And that was a big part of his electoral promises, that he's not going to do that. But immediately he comes into power, and Kenyans start disappearing literally a year after they've been sworn in. And now we have hundreds. Literally, the numbers cannot even be accounted for because the government itself is not acknowledging officially, other than the off-the-cuff apologies from the president. We do not have an acknowledgement from instruments of power that are supposed to be handling such things, saying this number of people is missing or these investigations are happening. Or in fact, there's, I think, only one police officer who is in court currently over the killings of last year. And that's because he's on video shooting at the crowd. But majority of the people who we have, over 100 recorded by human rights organizations that have been murdered. We have tens missing. So we really don't even have numbers. All we hear is that mortuaries are full. We can, there's a time it was in the news several weeks last year that the main mortuary in Nairobi was full of bodies that were not, on record as having been brought by relatives. So we are having a big problem. And when we see that, even before, I remember when we started our activism, some of us, if things would get very hot in Kenya, we would move to Tanzania to just cool things down. That's not possible now. If they're coming for even the ones who are here hiding, and Kenya was supposed to be a safe space for some of these people, they're picking them up like what happened to Maria. Then the whole of East Africa is chaotic at the moment. And this collaboration is very, very scary.
Neto, I'm just trying to find a common thread, because often that gives us an idea of motivation. Is it that most of these incidents are happening to people who've criticized the authorities of the day or opposing something that the authorities may be pushing?
I think, and we believe, as members of the United Government Party and also the President Muraga 2027 campaign, we think that Africa, or the East African region, is at a critical juncture. It's a sort of thing that we experienced when we were fighting colonialism. East Africa needs to break from its dictatorial past. East Africa needs a reset. We need to get back East Africa to where the founding fathers are. When President Nyerere and his colleagues, Jomo Kenyatta and the Ugandan counterparts fought for independence. They fought for independence to get Africans out of poverty, to get Africans out of slavery, to get Africans into a free space where you could live in dignity and pursue your fundamental freedoms. The leaders who took up power have since gotten into regression. You see that we are watching rights, dirigible rights, rights that are supposed to be non-dirigible, acts of torture, inhuman, degrading treatment. When a lady comes on TV and said she was forced to strip naked, insertions made on their private parts, that's inhuman. That's inhuman, degrading treatment. I mean, who does that to a fellow human being? For whatever it is worth, for whatever you want to fight for, why would you get someone naked and also have intrusions on their parts? The other thing that we've watched, which I think Wanjeri has spoken to, went counter to that very fundamental core of the refugee law, the principle of non-refoulement. We have seen in the country of Kenya, which for the longest has been a humanitarian hub, that Kizza Besigye, who is not a normal East African in a sense, he's been a presidential candidate and is of international standing, that he can just be picked up in the streets of Nairobi like a piece of chicken, then sent back to the authorities in Uganda. What then is a principle of what is that principle of the International Covenant for Refugee Protection? What is a principle? What is a place for the principle of non-refoulement? That even if Kizza Besigye was running away from Uganda, you can't forcibly bundle them into a vehicle and send him back. The case of Turkish refugees. So Kenya, East Africa, and Uganda have gone counter to fundamental principles of human rights, which I really think that we cannot let them go. So it is not a question that the East African activists have made any mistakes. No, it is a critical juncture. It is East Africa is fighting. It's fighting with itself to give birth to something that is better, and I think that's why we must keep pushing. East Africa must give birth to something better in terms of we must ensure that these things about the fundamental freedoms that we have in our constitution, the fundamental freedoms that we have in the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, those things cannot just be pies in the sky. And it's a good space to be. By the way, it's a good space to be because the activist Rose Njeri, when she was in court yesterday, having spent the whole weekend in the police detention for innovation. Kenya is supposed to be priding itself for supporting youth innovation. Here we are, someone who's creative, has innovated, should be given patents, should be given trademarks for innovation, is incarcerated for thinking. So Kenya is even stifling us from thinking. We're not supposed to think. You're supposed to just be there and the leaders are supposed to tell you what to do. They say jump, jump. We can't allow it. So it's a good place to be. I think it's a pains of birth. It's a pains of birth of a new East African community. It's a pains of birth of a new Africa. And I really think that it's a good space to be. And it's good that God has given us grace to be alive to see that we can also participate in the birthing. And that is why for us, we shall constantly move. And I really think that where we move forward, the East African community citizens must be sure that they are awoke to who they elect into office. And, it's happening in a very good time. The East African community elections are happening like almost, in a sequence of sorts. Tanzania happens this year, Uganda, and then Kenya. We must ensure that the people we put in office are people who believe in constitutionalism, rule of law, people who believe in fundamental human rights principles, who can then take Africa forward to what our founding fathers of the nations did. And that's, I think, it's a good space to be. And that's why all of us across the East African region and across the African region must show solidarity in a way that Pan-Africanists I've never seen before.
Well, Jerry, especially when I think about Rose Njeri's story, is it the digital space under attack as well? I mean, I was in Tanzania last week, and I keep saying this. I was shocked to find that Twitter had been blocked. And these are vehicles for people to be able to express themselves in a way they couldn't before. It looks as if freedom of expression is under huge threat.
Indeed it is. And in the Tanzanian situation, they blamed Kenya. for the chaos that they had online. They had never seen what they experienced after the abductions and the detentions of the people who had gone to support Tundu Lissu. So what happens is Kenya has a very vibrant young generation, and not just young, even us who are our Gen X's, we are very focused on using social media for advocacy. And it has now become even more, impactful because of the last year's finance bill. All the protests and things like that were being planned online, and this has really shaken the establishment because they have lost their war on information. They had the monopoly before because they had paid bloggers and they had all these narratives they'd push out, even using our mainstream media. Now they can't. It is impossible. Kenyans own the space now. And though Tanzania got a bit shocked and they had to shut down because it was too much for them, in Kenya, it's the norm. And we have this thing called Computer Misuse and Cyber Crimes Act, I think Net, you might correct me, number 5 of 2018, where they're using that, and that's what they used to arrest Njeri. And everybody who is using their online spaces to do any advocacy or to go against what is being done, the anti-corruption campaigns, is being taken to court under this bill. We have tried to fight this bill. In fact, there are people who've been taken, like one of our very big activists, online activists called Cyprian. Every time he's taken to court under this bill, they lose and the court dismisses the case because really it is not, the bill itself is faulty. It's being used to silence people who have a huge following online. I'd like to read you something that Njeri did, and what Njeri did was phenomenal. The president has been very keen in saying, I need to support the young people in their innovation, and the government is ready to give them any support they need. But when these young people or whoever else decides to use the same systems that the government is supposed to be supporting, they're arrested for using their head. They're arrested for new ideas that the government does not know how to deal with, even with all their bloggers and all the money they spend every month. And I'm telling you, it is a lot of money. They have people on a payroll who just sit online and troll or blog or whatever for the government, and it's not working. So yesterday, after she was released, she released a statement, and one paragraph of it really caught me, because what they did is they sent 3 Subarus, the Subaru vehicles. Those are the ones that they use when they want to abduct and arrest us. So our Directorate of Criminal Investigation uses Subaru cars. And they sent 15 men to her, 15. She's a tiny little, young woman, and you're sending 15 grown men and 3 vehicles to arrest her. But this is what she said. If they sent 3 Subarus and 15 men to arrest little old me because of an idea I executed, then they surely know the power of ideas. They may line their pockets with taxpayer money, grab all public land, steal from our pensioners, defund and desecrate education, show disrespect to professionals, and still they remain afraid of ideas. So we should not be afraid to think. That's a very powerful statement coming from somebody who has just spent 3 days. And by the way in Kenya it works, once you're arrested, like on a Friday, you have to stay in, you can't be bailed or anything until you're presented to court on Monday. They intentionally took her over before the weekend, knowing very well on Monday was a holiday, so she could still not have been presented into court. For what? For coming up with an idea for us to exercise our right, constitutional right, to react and participate. We have something in our constitution called public participation. They cannot pass anything until the public says it is okay. And that was a tool that would have allowed many more people to engage in this process of the Finance Bill 2025. So what they have now done is they have made it impossible for this bill to pass as is, because they brought more scrutiny to it. Even the things they would have wanted to hide, now Kenyans are looking at this bill and wondering, what are they hiding? Why would they go to the extent of arresting Njeri, who is just giving us a tool to engage with the process? So our online space is very vibrant, and they have lost the information war, and it's beautiful to see. I'm telling you, from an activist position, I am enjoying the scenes of what is happening online. And unless they shut down, they're not winning this war. That's for sure. They're not.
I wish we could speak for so much longer. It is just one of those issues I think we need to keep in public view. But to both of you, thank you so much indeed for joining us on the program and giving us a sense of the challenges that citizens are facing, particularly human rights activists. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. And thanks for having us
Thank
on
you
the
for
show.
having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's Wanjeri Ndoro, President of the International Society for Human Rights in charge of East Africa, and also Neto Augustino, who's a co-leader of the United Green Movement Party and also a member of presidential candidate Maraga's 2027 team. It's 8:30. It's time for your news headlines. Here's Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Nigeria's Defense Chief of Staff, General Christopher Musa, has called for the country's borders with its 4 neighbors to be completely fenced. This, he says, is in order to curb the entrance of armed groups amid escalating insecurity. The United Nations World Food Programme and UNICEF have condemned an attack on a humanitarian convoy in North Darfur in Sudan. The attack, which occurred last night, saw 5 members killed and several others injured. And today marks the beginning of the annual Hajj pilgrimage, a monumental spiritual journey that sees millions of Muslims converge on the holy site in Saudi Arabia. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
And now it's time to check in from the sports desk. And here's Musibudi Makura with the latest in sports news.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. We'll start with cricket. Indian superstar Virat Kohli has overcome and was overcome by emotion as the Royal Challengers Bengaluru finally broke the IPL duck with a 6-run win over the Punjab Kings in the grand finale at the Narendra Modi Stadium in Ahmedabad on Tuesday night. It saw them finally lift the title for the first time after a long 18 years since the IPL was first launched back in 2008. Only 2 teams from that first edition, the losing finalists, the Punjab Kings, as well as the Delhi Capitals, have yet to lift the famed trophy. But no player could be more worthy than Virat Kohli, who has been one of the stalwarts of this team and has been with this team from the beginning, and having lifted all manner of the other trophies internationally as well as domestically, he finally adds this one to his trophy cabinet, which he admitted was right up there with the best of the other trophies. A number of former RCB stars were also at the game to watch them finally get over the line, including former Proteas legend A.B. de Villiers, as well as former West Indian legend Chris Gales. And Kohli also had some special words for his good friend A.B. de Villiers, who he embraced on the field after the win last night. In football news now, Kenya's Michael Olunga has officially left Qatari giants Al Duhail, bringing an end to a remarkable 4.5-year spell that saw him become the club's all-time top goal scorer with 130 goals. Al Duhail confirmed the striker's departure in a heartfelt statement posted on their official website, praising Olunga's professionalism, discipline, as well as immense contribution to the club's recent successes. Olunga joined the Qatari club from Japan's Kashiwa Reysol in January of 2021 and hit the ground running. Reflecting on his departure, Olunga expressed pride in what he achieved during his time in Doha. Now, the Nairobi-born striker also left the door open for a possible return, hinting that he could one day rejoin Al Duhail in another capacity in the future. Back home now, Banyana wrapped up the Three Nations Series challenge in style on Tuesday afternoon, defeating Zambia by 2-0 at the Lucas Masterpieces Moribe Stadium in South Africa's Pretoria, a capital city, in a tightly contested but often physical clash between the two regional neighbours. After goalless first half, the South African senior women's national team stepped up the intensity in the second half, with Bongega Gamede breaking the deadlock in the 74th minute with a stunning free kick. her first goal for coach Desiree Ellis' side. The momentum then stayed with Banyana Banyana, and Jermaine Seposwine doubled the lead in the 82nd minute to secure the win at the tournament title. Reflecting on that performance, Dr. Desiree Ellis commended her players for sticking to the game plan, but also highlighting areas that still need to be improved on as they continue their preparations for their WAFCON defence in July in Morocco.
Today, this was a true team effort. I think we stuck to the game plan. We denied them space. We moved the ball around quickly. And I think that's what got us, we settled down better. We pressed them when they had the ball. And those were some of the things that we worked on. But we still have a lot of work to do. There were some moments where they got behind us. We need to be better at that. Some moments, especially in the middle of the park, we gave the ball away unnecessary. Late in the second half, we did some silly things at the back. And we need to manage that better, play the game in their off. But other than that, happy with the performance. So
now, Zambia, who came into that fixture following a 1-1 draw with Botswana a few days ago, posed a tough test for Banyana Banyana throughout that game. That head coach, Nora Hoptul, admitted that her side struggled to convert key moments into goals.
Well, I think the first half belonged to us. I think we had a good control in defense, in the mid-press, entered into some good transitions out of it. At the moment today, we just missed this absolutely danger, this kukakata. We have not been in the last pass precise enough. So we should use one of these transitions and play it a bit out better. I think in second half it was a bit an open game on both sides.
And finally, Australian Nick Kyrgios says he will miss this year's Wimbledon after suffering a small setback on his latest return from injury. Kyrgios, who was beaten in the 2022 final at the All England club by Novak Djokovic, has played very little tennis over the past 2 years because of a troublesome wrist that required surgery. In March at the Miami Open, the 30-year-old won his first singles match since 2022, but later pulled out of the French Open with a knee injury, where he had been scheduled to play the men's doubles section of this year's French Open. Wimbledon, by the way, will get underway on the 30th of June. That concludes your sports news this morning on Africa Rise and Shine. I do return in the next hour with the On The Move team for more sporting updates. As always, for any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. The EU-African SME Summit. Join more than 200 changemakers from June 19 to June 21 at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. It's where trade meets transformation. We are building Africa's future through AFCFTA, the EU's global gateway, and the power of small businesses. It's an opportunity to spark collaboration and unlock Africa's investment. Presented by the European Entrepreneurs, the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Shared Value Africa. This is a summit not to be missed. Register now at euafricasmesummit.eu. The rhythm of Africa, the pulse of the continent. This is Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
For the final time on Rise and Shine on this Wednesday, let's find out what's happening from the world of economics. Chandugo Legege has our business news.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Chad's Finance Minister Tahir Hamid Gulen says the National Development Plan seeks $30 billion in public and private investment as it pursues growth in areas including digitalization and infrastructure. The plan, called Chad Connection 2030, is backed by the International Monetary Fund, which last month reached an agreement with the country for a 4-year financial support program worth about $630 million, and by the World Bank. It will be launched in September in Abu Dhabi and aims to conclude deals with investors in sectors including roads, electricity, and digital economy. The South Sudan's economy is facing major challenges with the war in that country, making the situation worse. Oil exports are under threat with major investors pulling out and international loans drying up. Internal government dysfunction is also contributing to the crisis. An expert on Sudan and South Sudan and associate professor at the Center for Peace and Security at Coventry University, Jan Pospisil, weighs in.
So the interesting question is now why this year's budget for the first time even works with such a huge deficit and has these oil revenues for the first time actually at that low level, which is closer to reality than ever before. This is a valid question to ask, especially when you go historically through South Sudanese budgets, and given also the high level of corruption there, this budget is basically kind of numbers that are pretty random.
South African supermarket retailer Spar Group reported a marginal decline in half-year earnings as group revenue from continuing operations remained steady at $3.70 billion. The retailer says headline earnings per share, the main profit measure in South Africa from continuing operations, fell by 0.4% to 450 cents in the 26 weeks ended on the 28th of March, down from 451.9 cents a year earlier. The South African Department of Minerals and Petroleum Resources has decreased fuel prices following the dismissal of the Economic Freedom Fighters' fuel levy increase court challenge. The party argued that in the Western Cape High Court that the Finance Minister, Godongwana, took an incorrect approach in his decision to propose an increase in the general fuel levy. Godongwana announced the increase when he tabled the third revised budget in Parliament last month. The Department's Director for Fuel Pricing, Robert Mage, says the changes, which came into effect at midnight, were influenced by several factors.
Both grades of petrol 93 and 95 octane will decrease by 5 cents a litre. Diesel will decrease by 36.9 cents a litre. Illuminating paraffin at retail level will decrease by 75 cents a litre, and LP gas will decrease by 89 cents per kilogram. The reason for these fuel price changes are as follows. The first one is the lower oil prices and stronger rand against the dollar during the period under review.
The U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order doubling the U.S. import tax on steel and aluminium to 50%, further disrupting the global trade. The tariff will come into effect within hours. The White House said it marked the new golden age. The BBC's Michelle Fleury has the details.
About a quarter of US steel is imported, mostly from Canada and other close allies. But these higher tariffs won't necessarily hit foreign producers. If they decide to pass it on, US factories that rely on these imported metals could see costs rise too, which means higher prices for American businesses and consumers. Sounding the alarm, groups representing global aerospace companies and US airlines. They have warned that the new duties on imported commercial aircraft, jet engines and parts could put air safety and the supply chain at risk.
$1 in Nigeria is at 1,000 naira 580, Botswana 13 pula 27, Kenya is at 128 shilling 4, Zambia 26 kwacha 74. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 66, Russia 78 rubles 88, India 85 rupee 58, China 71 19, South Africa 17 rand 86 cents. $1 is 73 pence to the British pound and 87 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $3,350, platinum at $1,080 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $65.37 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chandruk Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Hawa wa Afrika Kusini wenye asili ya kizungu ambao wamepewa ukimbizi huko nchini Marekani. Je, nini chanzo cha wao kuomba ukimbizi nchini Marekani?
Wenyewe wajaomba ukimbizi. Kuna shirika fulani inaitwa AfriForum, shirika mbili za wazungu ambao wanatetea haki ya wazungu hapa, AfriForum na Solidarity. Hao walienda Marekani kufanya kampeni kusema kwamba wazungu wananyanyaswa hapa Afrika Kusini, na walivyofanya hiyo kampeni serikali iweze kuwafuatilia kujua nini ambacho mnasema kwamba mnanyanyaswa.
Kuna namna ya wao kwamba wamepoteza uraia wa Afrika Kusini, na je, endapo Trump akamaliza muda wake madarakani, uhalali wao wa kuishi nchini Marekani ukoje?
Itakuwa vigumu, kifupi itakuwa vigumu wenyewe kupoteza uraia wao.
Darubini ya Afrika 11 kamili hadi 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Es-tu préoccupé par quelque chose? Es-tu passionné par les questions qui comptent? As-tu une voix qui mérite d'être entendue? Eh bien, nous avons la plateforme parfaite pour toi. Téléphone-nous ou fais-nous un WhatsApp au +27 66 408 87 42 et nous te rappellerons. Sois dans la conversation.
Salut Channel Africa, ici Beno le diamant rouge et Binal Export depuis le Cameroun, le pays des lions. Voilà.
Sois dans la conversation. Il ne s'agit pas seulement de parler, mais c'est ta chance d'exprimer ton point de vue, de partager tes opinions et de t'engager avec une communauté qui valorise ton avis. Suivez-nous sur les réseaux sociaux, visitez notre site www.channelafrica.co.za et préparez-vous à partager vos points de vue sur Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
46 minutes past 8 Central African time it is here on Africa Rise and Shine. About another 14 minutes before we get to the top of the hour and we hand over to On the Move. Let's take a look at this story. Former DRC President Joseph Kabila met with women and youth associations to discuss efforts to restore peace across the country. During the meeting, Kabila expressed his commitment to re-establishing stability for the Congolese people and bringing an end to ongoing conflicts, particularly in the eastern regions of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The associations pledged their support and participation in the pursuit of lasting peace. Channel Africa's Jimmy Shukrani Bokomera reports from Goma.
While in Goma, North Kivu province, former President Joseph Kabila Kabange met with the women leaders of Goma to discuss with them about the political situation in the whole country, DRC. During their discussions, they shared with him the primary goal, the restoration of peace in the North Kivu province, part of which has been occupied by the M23 rebels for approximately 6 months. These women also expressed their desire to be fully involved in all efforts and initiatives aimed at restoring peace in the region, stressing the urgency of putting an end to this conflict which is paralyzing the lives of our family. The representative of women mediators and ambassador for peace in the Ruchuru territory, Liberata Rubumba Buratwa, member of the delegation which met Joseph Kabila, asked the former president to use his experience in order to restore everlasting peace in the eastern of the Democratic Republic of Congo. As part of his consultation, Joseph Kabila Kabange received the Goma Youth Association. There was a single topic on the agenda: talk about peace. President Kabila retired that Congolese youth have a decisive role to play in preventing the fragmentation of the country and to struggle against insecurity and bad politics, which has been reconstructed by the government of Kinshasa. Faced with multiple pressures, he invited them to make a courageous and responsible choice for the sake, history and posterity. Addressing the youth, he asked them to reject exploitation and to be the builders of a real peace based on the unity, truth and solidarity. the end of the discussion, the young people expressed their desire to be more involved in the process of finding solution, affirming their willingness to actively contribute to the reconstruction of the country. The president welcomed his awareness and reaffirmed his willingness to support a youth who is aware, engaged and agent of changement. Until now, the Tshisekedi regime continues to blame former President Joseph Kabila for being a great founder of the AFC M23 rebels, which according to Kinshasa causes insecurity in the eastern part of the country, calling him a collaborator and leader of this political and military movement. For his part, former President Joseph Kabila also judged the Kinshasa government for sowing terror among civilians and prioritizing injustice and the dictatorship in the DRC. Reporting from Goma, Jimmy Shukran Bakomera, Channel Africa News.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has appeared before the Tel Aviv District Court. He was indicted in 2019, you may remember, on charges of bribery, fraud and breach of trust, all of which Netanyahu himself denies. The trial began in 2020 and involves 3 criminal cases. He has also denied the charges and has pled not guilty. The 75-year-old is Israel's first sitting prime minister to be formally charged with a crime. Ditaba Tsotetsi has more.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in court at a time when his country is facing an escalating conflict in Gaza. This phase marks the beginning of the prosecution's cross-examination. Netanyahu faces questions over charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust charges he has consistently denied. Netanyahu is also still facing the warrant of arrest issued by the International Criminal Court over alleged atrocities committed in Gaza. UN Human Rights spokesperson Jeremy Lawrence.
The willful impediment of access to food and other life-sustaining relief supplies for civilians may constitute a war crime. The threat of starvation, together with 20 months of killing of civilians and destruction on a massive scale, repeated forced displacements, intolerable, dehumanizing rhetoric and threats by Israel's leadership to empty the strip of its population also constitute elements of the most serious crimes under international law.
Spain has joined South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Lawrence says Pretoria must be supported on this case.
In 2024, the International Court of Justice found that there was a real and imminent risk of irreparable prejudice to the rights of Palestinians in Gaza under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide.
While Israel government says it is reviewing the incident after reports of troops firing at an aid queue in Gaza, David Mensa is a spokesperson for the Israeli government.
Allow me to address the incident that happened as crowds moved along designated routes towards a humanitarian aid distribution point in northern Gaza. Our soldiers identified several individuals who were deviating from the approved access route. Now, this occurred approximately half a kilometer from the aid distribution site. Now, our troops diligently issued warning shots, and as some of the suspects continued despite these warning shots,
ambulances have been spotted arriving at Gaza Nasser Hospital after at least 20 Palestinians were reportedly killed by Israeli fire. The Israel Defense Forces said it was aware of the reports of casualties and was investigating the incident. Amdi Tabasotetsi, SABC News.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet, Channel 628.
Hi, I'm Tammy Ngubeni, anchor of Africa in Business on Channel Africa, bringing you the African perspective.
And I'm Ashraf Garda, host of the National Pulse on SAFM, leading the conversations.
We've joined forces to bring you in-depth exclusive G20 developments as we count down to the much-awaited inaugural G20 summit in South Africa, November 2025.
Tune in every Thursday at 16:20 Central African Time as we explore how this first G20 in Africa impacts the continent, from trade and innovation to climate and development.
It's a powerful crossover between Channel Africa and SAFM
as we bring you the G20 through an African lens.
The G20 in Africa.
Global Summit.
An African voice.
Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné par la radio? Et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et vos 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Africa Update on Channel Africa.
Over 35 organizations are expected to converge at the Union buildings in Pretoria over illegal immigrants in South Africa. They say South Africa is facing a myriad of challenges and that foreign nationals are worsening the situation. Yes, Khutato, just take us through the main aims of the march, what you're hoping to get from them.
So we are basically saying to the President of the Republic of South Africa, illegal immigration is a pandemic. Implement the laws. It's not that we don't have these laws. How many people are being human trafficked? How many people are being hijacked? Our schools are full. Our hospitals are full. And it's almost as if we're carrying the burdens of the entire Africa at the expense of South Africans. And we are basically saying enough is enough. We want the President of the Republic of South Africa to meet us at the Union building. We've submitted letters to say that we are coming on this day. We want to meet with him there to give him this mandate because clearly he has failed citizens. He's failed South Africans by failing to implement the law. That's the most important thing. We are going to give you a mandate. We, the people, shall govern.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu on Channel Africa every weekday from 12 to 2 p.m. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's take this moment to thank the team on Africa Rise and Shine. On technical production is Ndoro Lutuli. Production is Hlengiwe Mabaso, Pumuzo Ramagaza, Joey Lekhodi. On news, Onel Nzinzi. On economics, Chanduko Ligege. On sports, Musubudi Akura. And our social media pages are handled by Talent Butelezi. And if it's your birthday on this Wednesday, the 4th of June, happy birthday to you. You share a birthday with Joyce Meyer. I don't know if you know that charismatic pastor, Christian pastor and author. She's quite famous on the television screen. She was born this year in 1943. You also share a birthday with Hakainde Hichilema, Zambian politician, the president from 2021. He was born in 1962. Interestingly, because I see a similarity in your stories, he was also born in Zim, then moved to Zambia.
Oh, no.
Stayed a bit there.
I'm the opposite way around.
And you're the opposite way. You were born
I was born on the Copper Belt.
So there's some cross-bordering happening there between who's born in Zim and who's born in Zambia. But we've got Palesa joining us in studio because, as we said, after Rise and Shine is on the move.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, there's a lot to talk about on the Move. In the first hour, we speak about mental health, and hashtags like mental health tips have been making the rounds a lot on social media. It's a great thing to see more and more people speaking about mental health, but experts are also warning that this may trivialize some mental health issues as people share tips, giving others, one-size-fits-all approach. And you need to be careful how you approach and receive the kind of mental health tips that you receive from social media. We'll be speaking to registered Councillor Adib Maraj, who's going to join us on the line to speak about how exactly to navigate that space on social media when it comes to mental health tips. And then in the second hour, we speak about the third EU-African SME Summit that's going to be taking place for the very first time on African soil from June the 19th to the 21st, 2025 at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Finding out a little bit more about this really exciting summit happening here on our own shores. We'll be chatting to Stefan Moritz, Secretary General of the EU European Entrepreneurs in the second hour. And then we go to our Live Well feature. That is, of course, our health feature. Today we're speaking about thyroid awareness. It seems like quite a lot of people, in fact, worldwide, around 1.6 billion people are at risk of thyroid disorders and diseases. And we're unpacking those with Dr. Dashni Naika in today's final hour.
1.6 billion.
1.6 billion.
That's like a quarter of the population.
Yeah.
Wow. The mental health thing is really, really critical that you do that, because there's no two people the same.
Yeah.
We're as individual as our fingerprints, and
Yeah.
so our mental health issues are not the same. And to get someone on social media who probably read half an article in a magazine giving advice is very dangerous.
It is quite dangerous.
Yeah. Anyway.
So that's what's coming up today.
Okay.
All right, interesting things, and we hope you get better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
With the flu.
I hope so too.
I have just recovered from it, but it's winter, isn't it? I mean, we're supposed to expect these things, but and I think we might still be getting COVID, eh? But that could be a topic for discussion for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We might.
All right. Well, I don't want to. I don't want to reiterate that thought. I really want COVID to be behind us, but it is a reality, as you say. So we'll be back with you tomorrow on the Africa Rising team. 6 till 9, so do join us for that. But we thank you for being with us on this Wednesday. That's from me, Asanda Beda.
And me, Peter Ndoro. Have an awesome day, and stay with us. On the Move is next. But first, here's the news with Onelen Sinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Looking at your top stories, Nigeria's defense chief proposes fencing borders